unexpected that it arose tonight? Is that topic unexpected? Did it unexpectedly arise within the 48 hours?
No, I can't say that. Well, yes.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
depending
yeah.
on, based on the recent conversations with the stakeholders, you
Yes.
might say that it was unexpected.
Okay, so we will pick it up then in the end of, toward the end of the public session.
Yeah.
Part of business, okay.
Yeah, I'd rather see that than.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Okay, so I have my marching orders and I'll be in touch with Richard tomorrow.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Nice seeing you.
Okay, Mr. Betancourt comes back. Thank you.
Thursday?
Hmm?
Are we meeting on Thursday?
No, I think we'll, I've been talking with Jackie and got a sort of Solomon solution. Oh, Mr. Betancourt's going to rejoin us. I hope
Yes.
he isn't.
Yeah.
He was,
We're not, camera's not on yet.
no, that's the other thing.
This was driving me crazy. I'll hear this in-
Yeah, no, hold on to. Good evening. Welcome all. This is the regular meeting of the Select Board. Today is Monday, June 11th. We have a fairly long agenda ahead of us. We will take up the notification of meetings, comments from the Select Board. We have a number of issues to ask the town manager to report upon, matters from the audience. We have no comptroller's report. We have a brief license hearing put in there, and then we have a very long 7 or 8 issues to deal with under the business agenda, so I would hope you can all stick with us and brought a substantial supply of coffee with you, things like that. Under notifications of meetings, we've been scheduling interviews for the position of town manager. I think we have scheduled two interviews, one on Tuesday and one on Wednesday. On Tuesday, we'll interview Phil Lemnios, and on Wednesday, Lisa Wong. We have been discussing the potential of adding a few more candidates. We had thought we might be able to schedule that person or persons this Thursday. That has not worked out for a bunch of logistics reasons. So what we will do is hold a meeting at 8:15 on Friday morning with our board to sort out the last of the interviews and schedule those to be held at that time. We will not be taking a vote on selection of a candidate on either Tuesday or Wednesday, and probably not on Friday, certainly, because we're going to have to do some reference reviews and due diligence checks. So we will be holding the interviews on Tuesday and Wednesday. I would invite all those who are interested to please come and attend. On Tuesday, we will have a sort of an open house reception in the Winchester room below us to our right. For staff and other members of the public who would like to meet the candidates. We will then hold a formal interview on Tuesday evening for one candidate, and in a similar pattern, we will hold the formal interview for the second candidate on Wednesday evening. I would expect we'll be able to schedule the additional interviews very shortly, and we would probably follow very much the similar pattern until we have considered at least 2 to 4 candidates, and then the board will sort of try to make a selection and recommendation at that time. So beyond that, our next scheduled meeting, regular scheduled meeting, yes, we'll wait on comments. Let me just finish the June 25th. We would have a regular meeting That's Monday, June 25th. We will have another meeting on Monday, July 9th, and we are tentatively scheduling with the planning board to meet on July 10th at 7 to talk about coordinating all of the downtown projects. The particular focus of that meeting would be on the development of an RFP for development of housing on the Waterfield block, something the planning board has been working on with the town manager. So those are the immediate events that are scheduled for this week. So, Mrs. Welch?
Oh, yeah, I just have one quick question. I probably misheard you, so I apologize. But did you say that we'll have at least 2 interviews? Because I thought, didn't you mean to say we'll have more than 2?
Yes, I'm sorry. What I meant to say is we're
I
going to interview
misspoke.
one person on Tuesday, one person on Wednesday, and as you have argued with me before, I think it is reasonable to think about bringing in an additional 1 or 2. It's up to the board how many additional people we want to interview, but we would talk about that, scheduling those, try to get, I mean, in part, it's to try to figure out what our schedule would be so we can
Right,
invite
no, I
people in.
understand it's
So we would
scheduling,
have,
but-
we'd be interviewing a total of 3 to 4 people, I think, if the board concurs.
Well, but that we will be.
I understand, yes, that, unless the board tells us otherwise, unless you and others say we are finished on Wednesday night, I don't expect that people will tell me that. But then the question is, we would then schedule interviews for the additional people the following week. So we'd have at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, depending on the board's position at the time.
I don't understand anything you just said.
This is the
I
first
think
time I'm
that's
hearing
very
of it. I
confusing.
will say that.
Yeah,
I don't know what we're talking about, so.
Yeah, I just think that's
We're-
very, with all due respect, there's a lot of inconsistencies in there. I think that there's and I'll just state myself, that there's an interest in having more than 2 interviews, with all due respect to the excellent candidates and the excellent job that the search committee did. So I think that it's appropriate, if you don't mind my saying, and if we have to discuss it, then maybe it should be later in the evening, but that we plan to have more than 2 interviews.
That's certainly my understanding from my discussions, that we would have more than 2 interviews, but those would be, we would use the Friday morning to see when we can schedule those additional interviews.
Right, but there definitely will be more than 2.
Unless the board tells me otherwise, that would be the intent.
Well, so then that sounds like
I
it's
think we
possible
would
there
need to
won't be.
discuss that maybe by the
Yeah.
end of the night.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the first I hear of this. I mean, we set up a process, and there were 3 qualified candidates that came out of the process, and 1 dropped out. So I agree with Jackie that the selection committee did a fantastic job. I disagree with throwing away their work.
Well, I don't-
They recommended 3 finalists, 1 decided not to pursue, so we have 2 finalists. This is the first I hear of this.
Correct, and the board Friday can decide they do not want to go further on that, but I've heard people saying it would be nice to look at a possible 3rd or a possible 4th candidate. That would be the board's, we can try to schedule that on Friday in those decisions and sort out how we pick and schedule those people.
and I'll do deference to Mariano's comments. No one's throwing out the work of the search committee. I think that's completely a misstatement. And I think that the concern is just that there's, as far as scheduling, that it's anticipated that there would be more than 2 interviews, and that's a simple point. And if we need to discuss it later in the meeting, then that's
At
fine.
this point, that would be a question to settle Friday morning, and I'm assuming that you would propose that we bring in additional people, whether through the search committee or otherwise.
And is there a
at that
reason that
discussion
couldn't
Friday.
be decided now, that there would be more than 2 interviews?
I think we haven't got it as a docket item per se, and I
Well, then
think
why
we
did
need a
you
little
bring it
bit
up?
more, because I wanted to alert the people that we were not going to be able to schedule the 3rd interview on a Thursday, and
So you're
that we
bringing
had
up
set aside,
scheduling.
and we had set aside Friday morning to deal with, specifically with the interview process. So that seemed to be the opportunity to have a full discussion of what we wanted to do.
So with all deference, you're bringing up some scheduling, but not overall scheduling of the candidates for the town manager position.
Well, we are scheduling Tuesday and Wednesday, the people we have already invited in, and we do those interviews. And then we've had, a number of requests from you and others that we look at additional candidates, and we have not been able to schedule those. The purpose of the Friday morning meeting would be to determine what time we can meet with those people and when.
Mr.
So-
Chairman,
And you may decide at the end of the Friday meeting, you want to do none or more than 2. So I'll leave that up to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I was gonna talk about this at the end, but it seems like there is a discussion that's occurring right now, and I would, follow along, Select Board Member Welch's theme, which is, to have have a third and fourth interviewee, and I'm not prepared to be part of, I'll give you my schedule. My schedule does not include moving forward with Tuesday and Wednesday unless there's a guarantee that we're gonna have a third and fourth interviewee. So that's my schedule.
That would be the purpose of having the Friday meeting, to discuss whether we're gonna have a third, fourth, or fifth interviewee. We don't have that schedule locked down at this point, but that would be the intent of dealing with that issue.
Yeah.
I thought we had this conversation a while ago that we were going to
Right.
use whatever the recommendation of the search committee. I mean, the whole point of us investing so much time in identifying the members of the search committee and them going through that whole process was for us to be removed from that process. So for us to go and tinker into a pile of resumes at this point, it really just undermines the whole
That-
effectiveness of the committee.
And
So
the purpose of the
I'm
Friday morning
concerned.
meeting would be to complete that
Right,
discussion.
because
I've
with all
heard
due respect,
that-
there's only two people that we're interviewing for arguably one of the most important jobs in town, and it has nothing to do with the search committee, who did a wonderful job, and the candidates seem wonderful. It's simply to have a transparent process where we have more than simply two candidates interviewed by this board that, from what I understand, will be making the decision on arguably one of the most important town, that our taxpayers pay for the position of town manager, and that we interview more than two people.
Just
And
to
it, with all due respect to the search committee, who did a great job, has nothing to do with looking backwards, it's simply looking forward.
I've heard.
Just
I've
to
heard-
clarify,
yeah.
7 candidates were
Yeah.
interviewed.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
And-
by the select board.
7 candidates were interviewed by the process that the select board established to find the new town manager to replace the
Sorry,
Richard here.
Richard, you
Sorry,
can't leave.
Richard,
Yeah.
we might keep you
Like I'm not even
around
here.
a little bit longer. So 7 candidates were, I just wanted to make it clear for those watching that it's not just 2 candidates that are interviewed for this position. 7 candidates were interviewed by the process that the select board established. For finding, over 40 resumes were submitted. So we.
Were you involved in that, in defining that process? Because I don't
Yeah.
remember defining that process, that, of the number of candidates that the search committee, who's done a fantastic job, would be interviewing, or the number that we would be interviewing.
I don't think it's a number. I mean,
we did-
I
we-
don't think we ever said to
We
anybody.
did not give
So
them a
therefore,
number,
we
we
didn't-
did not give them a number, we told them to send us all the candidates that are very, very qualified for the position, and whether that's 2 or 4, it's the candidates. We didn't set a quota
And maybe
of a
we
number,
should
we
have
didn't set a
done that.
quota that we wanted to fill with less qualified candidates just to meet a number.
Right, but
We told-
qualified is our
So let
job.
me intervene again. I've heard, we have 2 members who said we should press ahead with those 2 interviews, and the select board, we have 2 members who are saying the fact that it's now narrowed down to 2 is too few. I think we ought to interview the 2 we have in place that we have time for, because if we put that off into July, it's gonna take a while. And the purpose of the Friday meeting would be to have a full discussion about what the 3rd or 4th interviewees are, and, how we go about pulling them in if we want to do that. That's the current solution. I don't think we should ignore this search committee, but if the board feels that there's another candidate out there or candidates, then we should discuss that and give it a full
Yeah,
full
this isn't
consideration.
looking backward, because I can't praise the search committee enough, and I can't, it's just, nobody's perfect, and our board arguably should have defined more clearly how many candidates we really wanted from them.
I don't
and
believe
that's what
they-
But instead of looking backwards, just looking up, I think for most Winchester taxpayers, when they hear that the select board, who's gonna be making the decision, only interviewed 2 people for,
So I
such an
heard,
important
I've heard
job.
your argument,
Yeah.
and I don't believe the search committee anticipated, they had 4. One person dropped out, I believe, to apply for another job, and the 3rd person decided they didn't want to compete after reviewing their current position. So I don't think the search committee anticipated it
I'm
coming
not
to 2.
talking
And
about
if
the
the,
search
if the
committee.
board says we should consider whether we want to look at a 3rd or 4th candidate, I think that's perfectly legitimate, and that would be the purpose of the Friday discussion, to figure out how we want to do that. Because we
Chair-
must have a consensus on how to do that if we're going to arrive at a set of good interviews.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm just going to reiterate what I said Friday morning, which is to have, it doesn't matter how many were interviewed, we got two resumes for this most critical job. It's a job, I would think it's one of the most prestigious jobs in the Commonwealth. It's gonna pay around $200,000, and to get two resumes for that job is just not acceptable. And again, Friday morning, the deal will be sealed, and we will never get.
I'm
number
sorry, we are
394.
not, I have said, we are not voting on on the candidates on either Tuesday or Wednesday evening. I think, as we have long talked about, the process would be to interview them, and then we need to do some due diligence, and we may want to have a second interview with one or more of them. So the purpose of the Friday meeting would be not to vote on them, but to discuss the debate, finish the debate we're having now after we've had some time to think about it.
Yeah.
And
And the answer may be, Friday morning, you may decide that you've seen enough candidates in two. You may decide we want to see another half dozen. I think that's the board's decision, and we ought to have a reasonable discussion about that. But we don't have those other names immediately ready to be scheduled for interviews.
I think, though, that if the board does decide to add another candidate or two to the mix and to our evaluation process, that should be returned to the search committee to make another recommendation. So I think it would be bizarre for us to all of a sudden start hunting around and.
This is an open for Friday morning discussion. We could say we have a couple of people we'd like you to do additional screening interviews for, or we could ask them to recommend additional, but that's the Friday morning discussion of how we want to pick additional people, so we fill out the 3 to 4 slots, so.
Mr. Chairman, from talking to people that have been through this before, there was a time years ago when a town manager selection process was occurring, and there was a small number of resumes that went to the board, and I believe that was when Chad Maurer was selected. And the selectmen at that time said, it's not enough, go back and put in a few. I don't understand why having more is not an advantage to us, especially if one drops out, and then you have no negotiating ability.
Mr. Rico, I apologize, but I want to make myself as clearly understood as possible. I'm suggesting that issue be taken up Friday morning.
Yeah.
That if the board, you argue that we should have a third or fourth candidate, we should do that.
Can I make a comment related to that? That we're interviewing the 2 finalists tomorrow and Wednesday. If we don't feel like either should have the job, we can easily say no to both,
Well, or we
And
just
then-
fold and pick up others, yeah.
right? So it doesn't mean that just because we're interviewing the 2 most qualified candidates that the search committee gave us, it doesn't mean that one of them that we're going to enter negotiation with one of them. We can say no to both. I mean, that's still completely within our rights, and I think that's the process that we established. It doesn't mean that this is one of the 2.
The selection committee is an advisory committee. The buck stops here. We're the ones that are voting on this position, and we have to live with the ramifications if it doesn't work out. As I said on Friday, and I'm saying it again, 2 is completely
So
unacceptable
to
move forward with.
Mr. Rico, I hear you. Mrs. Welch has made the same argument. I agree. The board may want to interview additional people. That is the purpose of our Friday morning meeting, is for the board to concur on how that additional interviewees should be selected, and to find a schedule that we can do to accommodate our schedule and theirs. So we're not arguing that you shouldn't. I don't think we have the process in place tonight to pick people off the list.
And I'm arguing that it will never happen. I think it needs to be decided now to have an agreement to bring in two more candidates. It's just, I've given my position.
It's up to the board. I don't know that you want to limit yourself to 2. You may want 1, you may want 2, you may want 3.
I
think
agree,
that's-
I agree. The more
but that's-
we would
that's a
have is in the
decision-
best
That's a
interest.
decision I don't think we're prepared to make
Yeah.
tonight. I think that's the purpose of a Friday debate on the issue.
But Friday, everything is done. It's all
I mean,
done.
There's nothing done on Friday. All that will be done on Friday is we'll have had 2 interviews. We have not made a decision, we have not taken a vote on those people, and we can still go ahead. As you pointed out, it's up to the board to make the decision about who they want to interview, and in the end, to decide how many interviews they want to do with any given candidate and how to select them. So we're not ending the process by interviewing people that already scheduled.
I guess, why can't we, we're here now, why can't we take a vote to say, bring it on 2 more people? Why can't we do that? I mean,
So
we're
on
here.
Friday, when we took a vote, we had the names public. So do you have the names and the resumes of the 2 people that you want to push forward?
I mean, I'll take a sense of the committee that you want to add 2 more, but I don't think
Yeah.
we're going to release them now if we do that, so. And I don't know that you want to limit yourself to 2 at this a priori, right?
Again, I don't, I'm not saying 1, I think 2, I know Select Board Member Welch would be interested.
I understand, and then
Well.
the other 3 of us may have additional names that we want to.
For whatever it's worth, again, the selection committee, I know many of them, and they're great people, and I commend them for their excellent work. But like it or not, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody, the process went awry Friday morning when we got 2 resumes. And the process went awry when we weren't told 2 to 3 weeks before Friday that, hey, folks, you know what? We've got a little bit of an issue in that the resumes are really thin, and we've only got
Let me
2.
intervene again. I don't believe the search committee knew that they had 4. I don't believe they knew that 2 of them were going to drop out. If they had, I'm sure they would have informed us. I think it was, as it came down, the question came down from the search committee to the candidates, we're going to put your name forward in public on Friday morning. Are you ready to go? And the answer, in case one of them was no, I'm going to take another job, and the other one was no, I'd want to drop out. So I don't think the search
But they
committee
still made a
intended to deliver us.
unilateral decision not to give us more than 2. And I don't fault from them for that, I fault this board for not being
Well-
clear with how many we wanted or
Well, but
something like that.
that was not an instruction that we gave them. So they have not violated any of the instructions we
Which I
gave them.
didn't say
And
that
if
they
this
did.
board, as I'm hearing you, wants to go ahead and look at a couple more resumes, that's certainly within our prerogative to do. We have to think through how we're gonna pick those out. Do each 5 of us, do each one of us get a pick? Do we wanna go back to the search committee and ask them to give us another short list of names? We have to think through that process, and I don't, with our long list of things this evening, I'm not sure we want to do that. I'd rather have us look at that think about it, come back on Friday and think through how we want to do that.
Well, everything, if I could just add very briefly, everything we do or don't do represents, how our board is conducting ourselves in this process. And there might be a variety of views on that, but we all try to do our best. For me, I've gotten so many texts and phone calls and emails from Winchester residents extremely concerned about the process with only having 2 interviewees. So I don't want to go back over what we were, but this isn't just, my comments are reflective of what seems to be
I
an
believe we
increasing
had
concern in town about this issue.
4 names coming to us, and 2 of them dropped out at the last minute. If the board wants to add a 3rd, 4th, or 5th person to be interviewed by the board, we have the discretion to do that. So, and that's the point of the Friday meeting, is to sort out what that process is, and then begin to schedule to bring those people in. So,
Mr. Chairman, why can't we postpone Tuesday and Wednesday and?
Well, I think
Because,
that.
but Friday, but after Tuesday and Wednesday, it's a done deal. That's the way
I don't know what your definition of done deal is. If there's
Then-
no vote by this board.
Well, we either
and
vote
no
now
action by
or.
this board, there is no done deal,
Right.
right? Because the buck stops here, as you said before.
Right.
I think Mr. Howard has indicated he'd like to retire and resign somewhere within recent, through maybe next December or January, but things like that. We went to a fairly elaborate effort to schedule, to let people know that they're coming in Tuesday and Wednesday. I do not see any real procedural reason why we should not go ahead with those. If, again, as I think Mariano or somebody said, if we don't like either of the candidates, then we want to be moving on to others on Friday anyway. If we like one, we want to call 1 or more of them back to interview, we'll want to look at that process. So I don't see that much is lost.
I think also that for exactly the reason that Ms. Welch was saying, that she's received phone calls and text messages, we designed this process, excuse me, to not be political and to not have influence of different people who have their own agenda contacting members of the board. So that's why we have a search process that's done completely independent of us. So we undermine that completely when we
They're not
start going.
recommending-
Excuse me,
People
I have not
they're
heard
requesting
Mrs.,
a number of
excuse me,
people.
I have not heard Mrs. Welch or anyone else campaigning for a particular client. I think the
It's not, it's
concerns I
simply
heard was
the
the
number
number.
of people. It has
In which
nothing to
case-
do with who. No one has even mentioned a name to me.
So-
It's
Right,
the number
but-
of people, so please
this
don't
is-
misstate
Correct.
what I've said.
So I've heard very clearly she's
Thank you.
interested in the number. So again, I would suggest that we meet Friday morning to sort through the question of whether we want to add 1, 2, or 3 to our review list and deal with the 10.
Mr. Chairman, and I'll say it again, I'm not prepared to move forward with Tuesday and Wednesday without any assurances that the number of candidates would be increased to
Okay,
4.
well,
It's
do
just,
you
it's a
wanna put
disservice to the
Do you want to put a
taxpayers.
motion to that effect that we will consider on Friday morning, we will consider the addition of 1 or more candidates to the select board's interview process?
I'd like to do it right now.
That's what I just asked you. Would you like to put forward a motion, not the names, but do you want to sit down Friday morning and
I
consider how
want
to
to
do
make a
that?
motion now that we will expand the interviewees
Yeah, but
to
that's
4,
what-
right now.
Excuse me, that's exactly what I asked you. If you
Well,
would
you
like
said
to make a
Friday,
motion
you
to
said
that.
to do that on Friday.
No, you want to make a motion that we expand it and discuss the procedural as and who on Friday. Is that clear?
Sure, yeah.
Before, David?
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Okay. So do we have a second for that? This would basically be say, we're going to explore the issue of bringing on 1 or more persons, and we will set a procedure and date for that on Fridays and that discussion.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any further comments by other folks at the table?
I mean, I think to change the process that we established, just,
The point is, we didn't accept-
it has a really bad appearance, and we have 2 very qualified candidates, and we're sending them a message that we're changing the process after we receive their
We
names.
never set the
So-
process.
Well.
Yes, we did set the
No,
process.
we didn't.
So,
We're not changing the process. We have their recommendations. We are interviewing them. And the question is, it's certainly the board's discretion to add interviewees or to call people back to do it. That's, I think, what we're talking about.
In my opinion, Mr. Chairman, it is completely acceptable to amend the process, given where we're at. We did not create a situation where we got 2 resumes, which again is, in my mind, not acceptable. I've received numerous phone calls and texts from citizens saying that makes no sense to just have 2. So again, they're an advisory board. We have every right, we have all the ability to amend this process because they're advisory.
That's fine.
We're the
we
select board.
we can add 2 more on Friday. If we don't like the interviews this week, we can
We
add 2
wanna
more on
do it
Friday,
anyway.
without this
And
motion.
Dave, with respect, I find it very surprising that there has been, since Friday, it is now Monday, that you've received an overwhelming amount of phone calls from people that do not have an agenda or do not have any connection to this process that are saying, oh my God, I cannot believe there are only 2 qualified candidates that are going to be reviewed. It seems bizarre to me. I mean, it's just,
Defend
it's,
two interviewees
yes.
for a
That's
job that
not the
pays
point.
$200,000, we may as well just put that out there.
7 interviewees.
That pays
But
200,
we got
for
2.
our board that makes the decision.
Let's stick to the motion on the table. The motion on the table is that we meet on Friday with the intent of figuring out, after the Tuesday, Wednesday interviews, do we want to add 2 more? And go ahead and do that.
That's not the motion, Mr. Chairman. That's not the motion. What you just said as a motion is to talk about adding. The motion is, are we going to
Well, I
add?
can't, we can say we will add it, but it is the board's decision on Friday about how many and who we want to add, so I can't.
I think the
I
vote-
can't-
I would say that
can't
the motion is out of
preset it.
order without having the names and the resumes of who we're adding.
Well, I
I
think
mean,
we can, I think we
Right? I mean, on
can,
Friday, when we voted on Friday to schedule the interviews, it was specifically with the names of who we were adding, so.
we're not voting tonight to schedule particular names or particular dates for interviews, only agreeing that on Friday, we will talk about how to bring in an additional interviewee, and if the board at that point decides to bring in 1, 2, or 3, that's a decision we'll make then. If the board decides to bring in no one, that's the board's discretion.
My motion, as I understand it is to vote right now whether or not that we will take on an additional 2 interviewees for this job.
Yeah, I understand. So who are they? Because we need to have that Just like
No,
on
no,
Friday,
no,
we
no, you
voted.
don't.
It's just,
No, you
it's
don't. No, you
about a
don't.
number.
No, you don't. That is not.
So I do think that it would make sense for us to hear from Mr. Howley about their process and why they put forward two and did not add a third candidate. So,
Well, so that's getting off, we can invite him in Friday morning to discuss it with us. So the motion on the floor was to add at least, was on Friday to consider adding at least one or
I
more
consider
people.
to add.
That the select board expand the number of interviewees for the position of town manager to 4.
Correct.
Okay,
Not to
and,
consider, but to do it.
And then to review the process.
and then to review the
We can
process.
review the process on Friday.
With the possibility, keep in mind, that you would want to vote 5 or 3 or none.
Well, Dave's motion is
Dave's
for
motion
four.
is 4.
Dave's motion doesn't allow for that, it's only 4.
Okay.
Right, it's only four.
What is the downside? I mean,
Right, that's
even
what
when
is-
we
no,
no,
interviewed
I-
for
I-
the,
downside,
even
like
when
you
we
guys,
interviewed for the
everybody's saying-
planning, for the town planner, we interviewed, the
Fine, so-
planning board itself interviewed.
When
well,
you're
there
interviewing-
is a downside actually because we have two candidates that we have identified as the most qualified coming out of the search
We
process.
haven't
And we are sent, let me finish, please. And when we get to a point where we send a message to them that we're not serious about our process, they may step away, and they may be the most qualified out of anyone. So we may cause the most qualified candidates to leave this process by the fact that we're messing around this way, and we're doing exactly what we told them we wouldn't do. So that's the risk.
First
So
of
that's
all,
the
that
problem.
wasn't our process. Second of all, if they're interested in the position, simply adding more people to be interviewed is how life works. I mean, that's how it actually works on the outside. This is a $200,000 job. Saying that we're gonna interview 2 more people, it seems fair to the taxpayer of Winchester. It makes the process more fair. It may end up being that one of these people becomes our next town manager, which will be great, but at least we can say we interviewed 4 people for this job, which is standard. In fact, that's already a low number of any other job, not to
Right, but
mention one at
why
this
is there a
level.
number? I don't understand why there's a
We
set
interviewed
number.
7
You know,
people. We didn't
interviewed
interview-
7
We didn't.
people.
We did not, and we
And it was-
The
made
process that we
decision.
established.
No, we didn't.
And
Did
if we
you
don't like the
establish
2 that we
process?
interviewed
Did
tomorrow
you
on Wednesday,
establish
we
that
can add
process?
more.
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay, so,
yes, I was on this board when that
Okay.
process was established.
Was it
Yes.
established in March that they were gonna interview a certain number of people? And then if that was the
No,
case.
it wasn't a certain number of people. They were
Okay, well,
going
then
to
it
go
wasn't
through resumes.
established.
We did not establish
The number
a
of
number.
people.
We
Exactly,
told them to
that's the
send us the
actual
most
issue
qualified
right now.
candidates.
Okay, that's the actual issue right now. And in fact, it's our job to decide who's the most qualified. The search committee has done a fantastic job, and now it's actually your signature that's gonna be on this.
Absolutely.
It's not their signature.
Right, and I don't
And
want
so
the
have
most
you-
qualified candidates to back away because here we
Why
are
do you say that? Why do
demonstrating.
you, if somebody really wants this
Well, we already
job,
had 2 back away.
pays $200,000 and we simply interview 2 more people, you're afraid that they will back away? I mean, this is a normal
It's
process.
pretty typical that that happens, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
it's actually
not-
very typical.
Yeah, so-
of how
If
it-
they
of
don't, if
that
they back
happening,
out,
yes.
I don't want them. If they back out, I
$200,000 a year
want, I want
job
somebody
with
that
full
wants the
benefits.
job more than the air they breathe. Listen, regarding this advisory board, there's a time to listen and there's a time to lead. And we've listened to the advisory board, and the process went awry at the end. And I made a motion.
I don't
I
have
don't
an-
see how we lose out by having two
I don't
more
have an
people.
issue with meeting on Friday and deciding that if we don't like the candidates, that we will interview more. But
So, but,
to
yeah, so-
handcuff the number to 4 now
well,
just doesn't
we
make any
can, we
sense.
can change our mind on Friday, too, so.
If we can change it to, if we can change to whatever we want on Friday. then-
I would disagree that the search committee's process failed. I think they did a very good job. They brought
I
us
don't
4
think you said
candidates.
that, Mr. Chairman.
It went awry at the
It
end.
went awry. I don't think it went awry. They had brought 4
Disagreement.
names, 2 dropped out, and we're asking basically, do you want to go ahead and add 2 more? So let's, I think it's very important for this board to discuss it at length. I don't think we want to hire anybody into a very divided board. If the board doesn't have a good consensus on the process and on the candidates that come out, remember, we're talking about this before we've talked with any people. So this is all about process at this point. So I think we want to make sure that we have a process and have looked at the number of candidates and there's things, because we want somebody to come in with the full support of the board and maintain a good job do a good job for Winchester. We're looking at a very difficult kind of budget period the next couple of years, and we want to make sure we have the best qualified candidate, so.
So what I would say is if we want to add anybody, that we need to have the names. Just like we did on Friday, we voted for
We-
2, we had the names.
We won't,
So if we want to make it to 4, let's get the 2 names.
we can
No.
talk about the intent to put
And what's
4
the
on
process
Friday
of getting
and pick
these
the
names?
And work on that one.
I mean, how are we gonna do that? It's just,
Well, but that's Friday morning's discussion, so.
well, it's something to look forward to Friday morning.
So, I'm
I
gonna
think you
call
need to call a vote.
a vote at this point, because I think we need to have a good, full discussion of this, because obviously we're not all in consensus at this point. So, the motion on Mr. Arico's, I'm sorry, it's getting late already. A vote on Mr. Arico's motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Can you say the words again?
I'll let you try to.
You should have the clerk read it back.
Clerk, could you please read back?
Motion made by Selectman Rico that the select board expand the number of interviewees for the position of town manager to 4, seconded by Selectman Welch.
Okay, and the purpose of the Friday meeting would be to sort out
Well,
process and
Right.
see if we can schedule the names if we pick some. And we could at that time, obviously, by further motion, either add a 5th or subtract, so. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
No,
No,
Ayes have it, 3-2, thank you very much, we'll meet on Friday morning. Okay, now.
So, just.
Is that right?
You're voting aye
Yeah, so.
to add 2 more.
Correct, and we will meet on Friday morning to
Thank you,
discuss
Mr.
how to
Chairman.
do that. And if we are not able to select names or to add 2, then we'll have to reconsider the process by which we're selecting interviewees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
However, we will be interviewing 2 people in the Tuesday and Wednesday, and you can come and decide whether you think they're qualified, unqualified. We are going to ask members of the audience, members who come down and visit and talk with them to let us know I guess, either directly to me by email, or we'll have a paper form. This will be, we're going to hold an open house on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, just a sort of meet and greet, informal, and then we will hold a formal interview at 7 PM here in this room. Do the same thing that's one candidate on Tuesday, do the same thing for the second candidate on Wednesday, and we will have forms either at both the 4 o'clock and the 7 o'clock, as we did last time, for people to make comments about what questions we'd like to, they would like to, this is getting late. Peggy, if you have questions after meeting the candidates at 4 o'clock, you should write them down and forward them to me, and I will then distribute them to the board, and we can consider those during the interview. And we will do that both nights. Okay? Town manager's comments. I'm sorry, report and comments.
good evening.
There's coffee in our offices if anybody is fading already.
You have a pretty comprehensive agenda here, so I'm going to run through these topics pretty quickly. So, 3 appointments, as you can see from the materials, 1 external, 2 internal, all recommended by the hiring departments. I can answer any questions on any of them, but we obviously welcome Bud Wallinger to the custodial staff position here. And in particular, we would note Joanne Taft's, what we could probably call a promotion of sorts. As you know, Joanne works with Michelle Tassi in the HR department, has been there for a couple of years now, and has applied for the assistant town clerk's position. And as you can see from Mary Ellen Lannon's information, is recommending her for advancement to that spot, so we congratulate Joanne on that. No waivers being asked for, so you have your typical waiver period if you have any concerns. The commuter rail station topic is on there. Beth is in the audience. I just merely wanted to let the board know that we had heard from the delegation that it looks as though the control board has voted the design funds necessary to move the project from its 30% design level to 100%. And that process will be moving forward now. And it looks as though the design folks will retain the services of Jacobs and Associates, who are on the case up to this point of the 30% design, so.
If I may interrupt,
Yep.
I think the reason that's important is because the last time we met with the T, they said, well, it could be 6 months before we get the designer renegotiated
Selected,
to
right.
work on to move it up, and that meant 8 months or more. So I think Jason and Mike Day both, and then Beth, have been particularly diligent on chasing this down. So
And we should note the advocacy of the chair of the control board and at the MBTA.
Yeah,
who
I mean, I
made
think
clear
they
that
were a little
the
shocked at
timeframe
6
should be
months,
shortened
which was
up.
good, yeah.
So there'd be more information coming on that. We'll be probably having a report on the process over the next month or two, but the good news is that it continues to move forward. Stormwater utility topic, you can kick that over till you get to G2 on your own agenda. Bond issuance, as you know, we've been in the middle of issuing some new permanent and intermittent borrowing, and the good news is we did receive word back from Moody's last week that the town's AAA rating will stay intact and be maintained for this issuance, and we'll be providing you with the actual decision from Moody's when their final document comes out. But good news is
Yeah,
we,
just on the
yeah.
scheduling, several of you had inquired about moving that up and doing it earlier than the 19th, and I understood after checking with
Yeah.
Richard and Sheila that the materials won't be
we want the
available till-
materials in final form, so.
So the 19th looks like it would, or the date shortly thereafter would be
But
the,
I should note the efforts of Sheila, obviously, who takes the lead on this topic, Sheila Tracy, Stacy Ward as well, and Dan McGurl all kind of worked on the Moody's call and provided the information that they were looking for, so. Fish ladder activity, it's just activity, there are fish all over the place, there are heron, there are seagulls all over the place in town center. All good news, except for maybe some of the droppings that emanate from some of the birds, but you can look at the fish cam, you can do anything to see the herring jumping in and over the fish ladder. It's all good news. They're making it up all the way to Woburn, and we understand, so. Everything happening as intended by installing that ladder. The needs assessment survey, again, staff just wanted me to alert you to the fact that that survey is out there, can be obtained by going to our website, and any citizen can take advantage of taking that needs assessment survey. 20 Glenwood Avenue, as you know, we've been working on this tax title matter. Attorney Wade Welsh had produced the case and put forward the case on foreclosing the tax title. We took occupation of the building last week. We all went down to see what it looked like. It has not been lived in for probably 10 to a dozen years, and it shows accordingly. Few sketchy steps into the internal of the building. A couple of us almost went through the first floor into the basement, but luckily enough, there were no total submersions into the lower level. It's a total rehab. It probably has to come down in its entirety. At the very least, it's gutted from the total inside out down to the stone walls. It's a stone wall kind of house that some people might consider
What's the
significant.
square footage of the?
Square footage of is about 550 square feet internally. The lot itself is about 2,500 square feet. So a very tiny lot on the corner of Glenwood and a cul-de-sac, small avenue that runs down the side. So we'll just keep you posted on our efforts to reclaim it, but it's going to be a while before it ever gets into condition where whether the board or town meeting decides to put it forward for affordable purposes or whatever is decided to be done with it, it's not in usable shape right now. That's all I can tell you. So, but we secured it, locked it up again, and Pete Lawson's team will do some preliminary stuff on the site, but otherwise, it'll come forward for future action by both the board and town meeting as to what to do with the location.
Maybe something to discuss with Habitat as well as a potential project.
Could be a
for location.
Habitat kind of asset if the board and town meeting were to decide that it be put out for RFP for that purpose. Yep. So, just updating.
further
Right.
questions to Mr.
I have a quick question, although I don't know if we're gonna get to it later in the meeting. I apologize for not knowing that, but with respect to an update on the 25 mile per hour speed limit in town.
It's in the
and,
traffic.
Yeah, the report was very helpful. Is that something we're getting to later, Mr. Chairman, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
great. Thank you.
Beth is going to update us on a
Okay,
whole
great.
list of those.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions for Mr. Howard? If not, we have under, move over we have under E licenses, a request for a license for vehicle for hire for Vetriano Livery Services. Is Ruth Zizu here tonight? Sir, would you like to come up and introduce yourself,
Matters
sir?
from the
Did
audience.
we, are we
that
doing
people here.
matters from the audience?
Yes, I was going to clear out some of the other pubs and come back. And sir, yes, please, come up and join us. If you'd please take a seat and introduce yourself and give us a brief statement, if you would. There's a microphone there. If you'd. So you'll be broadcast all over Winchester to the 5 people that are listening. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rauf Hamzizou. I'm a resident in Winchester since now almost 4 years. I've been operating as a livery driver on my own. I'm incorporated. And I'm affiliated with a lot of companies. I don't operate especially in Winchester. I just live here, and my company is based where I live, but I don't operate here in Winchester. And I have some kind of regular lives there, but I didn't need a license to do that because I have my plates, which is incorporated, and we have $1 million insurance, which cover all the risk. But lately, a company asked me the license from the city. I explained to them that we don't need it, since we don't operate exactly in the city, in the premises of the city as a taxi cab. But they insisted, every company says, do this, and they come here and they ask for it. They said, you do have this kind of license, and that's mostly all of it.
Okay, so this will be in part to be able to garage the car here, even though you're operating primarily for clients elsewhere?
Of course, yes.
Okay. We have recommendations from all the staff.
No objections.
No
right?
objections. Jackie, do you have
Can I ask a
questions?
question? Thank you so much for coming, and we love Winchester businesses, but I'm just kind of curious, through the chair or through the town manager's office, how many livery licenses have been issued in Winchester? And is there sort of like a desired number, just so that they can be healthy number of businesses for the demand? Do you find that we don't have as many as we used to have, or if you could just give us a little more information, that'd be great.
I would say the number is probably a handful, small handful. I don't know whether or not there's like a statutory population equivalent, a
target?
formula
Yeah.
that comes about as a result of population. We haven't had many over the last year or so, but since I've been here, we've probably acted on 3 others that have come
Like
forward.
total?
Total, yeah.
Yeah, one of them was a gentleman who specialized in optometry services and used the service only to bring his clients who were flying in to, so this is a very limited number, I
So would
think.
residents be able to call your company and get a ride to the
Absolutely, yes.
airport? Okay.
Yeah, sure. And I work with Uber too, because every morning I get mostly clients from Winchester area. I'm very close. They told me, I said, I live here. After that, you are 2 minutes away. Oh, that's good. Can I have a business card? Yeah. And that's how it works.
It's great you have good coverage on the vehicle. You seem like a very smart businessman.
I mean, it's required by the Commonwealth to
Okay.
the
Yeah.
airport stuff, to protect the clients.
Airports, yeah.
We have further questions from the board.
Are you interested in a town manager, Joe?
No,
No comment, you don't have to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent business.
thank you.
Swap it for a car.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the board, I'll ask for a motion to approve
Open the hearing
licensing.
to see if there's any.
I'm sorry, yes.
It's not a hearing.
It's not a hearing, it's just a licensing, so, good. Phew.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I move that we approve a livery license for Vetriano Livery Service LLC.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, I will I guess I can risk it. Are there any matters, to pick up on Dave, well, is that part of the traffic? Separate from, okay.
Separate issue.
Matters from the audience, and Mrs. Schleicher will,
Thank you. This will be very quick. As Mr. Howard said, the fish are jumping down at the fish ladder, but the trees are dying on Skilling's Field, and I'm just wondering, I noticed 5 were dead already today. What is the process? Is that
The
covered?
warranty,
It is. Okay, that was what I was wondering. Does anybody know why they're dying? Just bad stock, or?
either, there's never a guarantee that all of them make it through the planting effort. Winter sometimes does them in, could be lack
Seems
of,
like quite a few, so
Yeah.
that's the reason I
approval
was
winter.
curious.
yeah,
Okay, so it's covered.
covered by warranty.
Good. So the trees will be growing, the fish will be jumping. This is good.
Thank you, Peggy.
Further on trees? No? Okay, thank you, Peggy. So let's move on to our business items. First one is the traffic program. We have a nice long list here. Beth has said she's going to go through it quite quickly. We've had a backlog of traffic requests for various improvements, and I think I asked Beth to sort of put all these together. She's done great work in doing this. She promises she'll blast through them and have brilliant solutions to all of them, so.
You wanted to have even more fun tonight talking about traffic. Okay, so like you said, I'm gonna try to go through these quickly. There's only a few that we've recommended for vote. Most of them are for conversation, update tonight, and scheduling of potential public hearings in the future. So the first one is a no truck sign that was been requested on Kenwin Road. There was a email from a resident of Kenwin Road who says they've noticed a number of tractor trailers who are coming from Washington Street and turning either right or left onto Kenwin, which is the street that connects to Cross Street. So there's a signal there. And they've requested a sign indicating no trucks at the Washington Street end. And the TRC, which is formerly called the TAC, agreed and recommended the signage be installed. I think it's fairly straightforward, so I didn't recommend a public hearing for this one.
It's a narrow street.
It is, yeah, and it's, it's very residential, it's a steep grade, certainly not intended for heavy trucking.
Yeah, we did, Mr. Deering had pointed this out to us, and we spent some time looking at, he recorded some of the trucks that were going up there, and we could not figure out a rational reason why they would have to climb up Kenwin as opposed to.
Yeah, I mean,
on the
getting
other
out
side.
onto Highland Ave doesn't
Yeah,
seem like a
those
comfortable
things
place
are
for
awesome.
trucks to be.
So I guess, do you want to deal with these one at a time this one you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think, like I said, there's only a couple that we recommended for vote at this point, so if you're comfortable taking that.
Would you like to,
Yeah.
well, I guess, is there any, well, let's put the motion forward and then discuss
Move
it.
that we approve a no truck sign on Kenwin Road at Washington.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion, questions? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, good, thank you, Beth. Next.
Great. So the next one, there was a letter back in October 2017 noting that some concerns about on Swanton Street, where Loring Ave comes out, that people are typically blocking that intersection. It's difficult for vehicles to come out of Loring Ave and either take a right or a left onto Swanton Street, particularly turning left. It's a difficult turning movement to make. So there was a request that something be done to try to free up that intersection so that cars don't stop through there. There's a lot of traffic in the mornings with that signal at Swanton and Main backing up, and then also with people going to the train station, not just on the weekends, but during the week as well. So TRC recommended the installation of a do not block intersection sign. Previously this evening, I was downstairs at a meeting of the TTAC. I think that's how we're pronouncing that acronym, so I'll stick with that. And some of the residents from the Loring Ave neighborhood were there and did request that we look more at the striping, similar to what we've put out here on Washington Street. I have no objection to that. I think we were just a little bit concerned about, from our firsthand knowledge of that striping, how well it's been working, but I think obviously that's something that's certainly within reason, is to do the striping and the do not block intersection sign.
So were you recommending both the sign and the pavement
So
sign?
again, when TRC was recommending the sign, but hearing this evening from some of the residents on Loring Ave, I had no problem if the board wants to move forward with the striping as well. I think those are both reasonable requests. And
Where would the signs be? Would they be like for those on Swanton Street
Right.
facing?
yeah,
in the
so it would
direction of
be
Main?
on the direction Swanton Street headed towards Main Street, because people are typically backed up at that light. So it would be, and 20 feet ahead of that to say, do not block intersection. And then we could do similar striping to what we've done out here with the X.
Yeah. I think the striping makes sense, because I
Yep.
think, people might miss the sign or
Sure.
not realize where whereas the striping is, plus, you don't know if there's space, on the other side, so the striping makes it clear that if you cross the intersection, you won't
Right.
make it, right, that you'll be blocking,
Yep.
so I think the striping makes sense in addition to.
Is there on-street parking there in front of that rehabilitation
There
center?
is,
I
yeah, and
would
so
just-
that makes it difficult.
Yeah, so I would
We've-
just suggest that, maybe even they work with that center, so that the location of the sign is something that
Sure.
will be, not a negative
Yeah,
for them as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Peggy, I assumed you want to,
Yeah.
you,
Do you want me to come up here?
yeah, certainly, but, yeah.
First of all, I want to say that the group downstairs at Matt, and I forget the name again, T-Tech.
T-Tech.
Thank you very much, T-Tech, since I'm Tic-Tac. Were fabulous, very energetic, great ideas, that group, and I can't say enough about the wonderful conversation we have down there. I'm a little concerned about process here, because how is the work that they're doing? It's advisory, and you have traffic review making these recommendations to you, but you haven't had the opportunity to hear what's going on with
So
T-Tech.
the TRC recommendations were made in April of this
Right.
year, before that TTAC committee was formally created.
There
So
there was no citizen advisory committee.
Okay, but
no
you
program
have, yeah,
at
but
that
you were
point.
being asked to vote tonight on something that happened in April when we had this great discussion
Well, I
downstairs.
guess the question tonight is, do you want to know the signs, and at the town engineer's recommendation, we would consider adding the pavement striping?
Okay,
So, and I think it's the town engineer's recommendation to us in the end that's critical.
okay, so that's what I was just trying to understand how they're valuable information.
And I would, I guess, it's up to Beth, if there were additional steps, we certainly did this at Myrtle, we did it basically on a pilot project to see if it
Right.
affected, we could come back and, the residents and the advisory committee could come back to Beth and to us and say, we'd like to do something different or additional.
Right,
So-
and we absolutely applaud that effort, that's what we were wanting, we wanted to see the striping. But I do have a question for you, when you put up these do not block intersection signs, do they have any weight? Is there any enforcement? If I decide, you know what, I'm gonna put my car right on that, is there any enforcement? To me, that's a question I pose to the board to consider. Do we have any enforcement of any of these signs, or are we wasting our time putting them up? They're nice. The problem with Swanton Street, as you know, is you're climbing a hill, and you have the cutouts for the parking in front of the nursing center, which were very good, because before cars were traveling in the middle of the street. But you don't have a lot of distance between Loring Avenue and where that first cutout starts. So although, yes, put a sign up, but the reality is, when you're climbing up the hill, chances are you're not going to see that sign. So that's the reason the striping with the sign makes sense. But I do question, and I ask the board to consider, what about enforcement of these do not block intersections? Do other cities or
We
towns?
certainly try to do that, I think, we could work, Beth could work with our safety officer to do it. We have a limited number of officers out on patrol at any time, and they're not gonna be able to sit on one spot and enforce it.
I'm not
per se.
asking
But
that, I'm just-
we could certainly work with,
Unless you want it to be deputized, Peggy, and we can
know,
put you out on the.
That's a great idea. Would match one- No, I'm just bringing up. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know if
it's a fair
true in other
question.
communities or not. Do they fine? Do they what? What enforcement do we have?
So I've
No, it's
seen
definitely
in other communities, they do have, and again, I don't know what the rules are, but I've seen signs accompanying the do not block intersection sign that say $100 fine or whatever. So I don't know if you have to actually post that fine in order, I don't know if there's a moving violation associated with it or whatever. That's
we could,
really
we could
a
look
question
into
for
that
the
in the
board.
next step.
That's
I guess the
yeah.
question is, would you like us to go ahead with
Absolutely, I
the
think
signs and
fabulous.
striping? The other thing I noticed.
T-TAC is wonderful.
Being lost in Somerville last week for a period, Somerville is much more aggressive in the width of its lines that it puts down. You really know when it's not sort of a casual kind of, gee, I'm in the box. It's pretty obvious you are,
But-
so
And
we
I
may
think
want to
putting
toy
the
with that.
striping at this intersection,
Okay.
maybe, we're going to try it, but I think, I'm not accusing everybody who's going up Swanton Street of being bad drivers, but quite honestly, some people don't know that that intersection is coming
Yeah,
up.
well,
So you'll
okay.
have two ways to see it.
Okay, thank you. John, did you have a comment, or?
I was just gonna say, I've been on Loring Ave trying to get onto Swanton, and what happens is if, when you get to the end, if you put a do not block intersection sign coming up Swanton, you're just gonna have people pulling out of Loring. So the real problem is you need a longer green light, you need to clear Swanton Street. So I would suggest that there's probably a different answer than more paint that has to be painted for the next 100 years.
Okay, Beth, your recommendation is we put up the sign and put in the, at least on a pilot, the
Correct,
paid
yeah.
striping, okay? Do we have a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I move that we accept the recommendation with the amendment from town engineer that we add the do not block intersection sign and also paint the intersection.
Could I just add, I think maybe it would be added to that if someone, following up on the very important comment from the audience, that someone check the signal time for that traffic signal in front of Andrea's Pizza?
Yeah, we can
That
certainly
seems like a really
look,
brilliant idea.
one of the
We don't-
things-
We control those, right? Or-
State Route 38.
yeah,
That's
it's
ours.
our,
But it's
our
ours.
signal,
Yeah.
yeah. One of the things we're beginning to task the advisory committee and town engineers to look at whole corridors to see how they operate, and that would be a critical issue
But
for,
instead of that, just kind of maybe you're taking notes, but that maybe be part of the motion, to at least have someone look at it.
certainly look at it, yeah.
Second?
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Okay, thank you, Beth.
Okay, so then those are the only two that were recommended for a vote, so everything else is just an update or a recommendation for a public hearing. So the next item is we've gotten a couple of requests over the years, one back in 2016, one in earlier 2017, for some stop signs on St. Thomas More Drive. The request in 2017 was for stop signs at St. Thomas More Drive and Socrates Way, St. Thomas More Drive and Wainwright Road, St. Thomas More Drive and Aquinas Path. And the one in 2016 was for a stop sign at St. Thomas More Drive and Aristotle Drive. TRC recommended back in, I want to say 2016, the installation of the stop sign at St. Thomas More Drive and Aristotle Drive. And we, last year, made some recommendations about the other 3 locations of stop signs. In the interest of time, I won't go into detail on those, but we did do traffic counts back in December of 2017 as well. So I think I would recommend at this point that you hold a public hearing to hear from the neighbors on that, and we can certainly give the TRC recommendation at that time in terms of what our thoughts were. I would just say, as we've said in the past, that typically we try not to use stop signs for speed control. It's sort of in the MUTC that you should not be using stop signs for traffic calming measures. So some of these locations, I think, there's obviously some concerns about the speed and volume to that neighborhood. I think some of these certainly make sense from a traffic control perspective, and some of them maybe not so much from the traffic calming perspective. We should probably be looking at other measures to better calm the traffic through that neighborhood. So I would recommend you move forward with the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a quick question? So with that public hearing, just point of information, so would all abutters be notified?
Yeah, so we usually try to
Because it's
notify.
multi, so I just wanted to.
Yeah, we try to notify, kind of over notify typically, so that the whole neighborhood is aware of what's going on.
So since it's gonna be several of them taken at once, so you'll notify all those abutters,
Yeah,
so maybe.
I would think
yeah.
a pretty wide area.
And I think this neighborhood's been pretty active in requesting some
Yep.
solutions for traffic, so I think they have their own kind of lists and are connected that way as well, yeah.
But to officially get a
Yep.
town notice so that
Oh,
their
yeah.
voice can be heard in this process officially.
We always send out,
We do
yeah.
we do that all the time.
I just wanted to double check
Yep.
because there's 3 of them that are.
Yep,
Good
yeah,
one,
so,
yeah.
yeah, I think we would do everybody from, Johnson Road, kind of that whole
Yeah,
neighborhood.
good.
Some of that is cut through traffic coming up Route 3 and,
Right,
Understood.
okay. So, public hearing on that one?
yeah.
Okay.
So again, these public hearings, I don't know if you want to schedule them over the summer, or you want to wait till the fall when people are back in. I'll leave it up to you guys to schedule. I know you have a busy schedule going forward. The next one was at the intersection of Nelson Street, Spruce Street, and Shore Road. So Spruce Street and Shore Road kind of bisect each other behind Winchester High School. This was actually one that was brought forward by the safety officer. There's been some near misses. Right now, it's kind of a weird intersection. I don't know how many people are familiar with it. Nelson Street comes down towards the high school, and then Spruce and Shore kind of go at an odd jag behind the high school, and nobody has a stop sign in that area, so I think there's been, and obviously it's always been like that, even, before the high school was renovated, there were no changes made back there to the intersection. But perhaps there's just more people being dropped off in the rear, and I think it would be best if we were to add a little bit of additional stop control behind there. TRC recommended that we install a stop sign at the end of Nelson Street, so at least one of those groups of people would have a stop sign. So again, I would recommend that you hold a public hearing on that to get some input from the neighborhood. The next one is Myrtle Terrace, so not to be confused with Myrtle Street. Myrtle Terrace is a very small street that comes off of South Border Road and connects down to Highland Ave. We received a letter from a resident back in June of 2017 concerned about the speed and volume of cut-through traffic from South Border Road.
This is on a hill, right?
It is, yeah, it does come
Very,
down
very
now.
much, yeah.
Yep, and it's a tiny street. And so we did some traffic counts out there. Now the volumes weren't super high, but when they were high, they were very high. So we had 2 days where in the whole day, the average number of cars was 75, but in one morning peak hour period, we had 34 cars and 42 cars in that on 2 different days in that 1 hour period. So
Wow.
almost half of the cars in one day came during 1 hour. So it's clear that that street is being used by people to cut off the light at South Border Road. So the TRC recommendation was a do not enter sign between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., similar to what we did on Myrtle Street. Again, I'd want to hear back from the community and the neighbors who live there and make sure that this is something that they all are in favor of. If they're, we didn't see any problems in the afternoon as much. It seemed like the morning was really the peak time, but I'd want to hear from the neighborhood to see what their thoughts are on that as well. The speeds were very low. It's a narrow street, it's a small street, curvy street, so I don't think that's as much of a concern out there. Okay, the next one is Main Street at Highland Ave. So this intersection has been, I'd say, in the past 3 to 4 years, has really become a problem. We've had, since March of 2016, there's been 11 accidents at this intersection. And several of them have caused really severe damage to the property at 115 Main Street, to the point that last year the DPW installed a guardrail at the corner of Main and Highland, and we've had to place it 3 times since last September. It's been hit 3 times. So there's a couple things going on here. This intersection was part of our prioritization plan that we submitted to the state for our Complete Streets program. It was a very low priority because we didn't have as much of the accident data as we have now. And so in the past year, we've really tried to ramp up what we can do here to try to help out this neighborhood. So we did, as part of the MOU, the town will receive $25,000 as part of the MOU for Eversource. And we received some capital money. So we actually went ahead with the design of this project. We're in design right now with Tool. I'm hopeful that we'll get construction funding through the Complete Streets program. If not, we'll be looking to capital to help us fund this probably after the Eversource project is completed. But I would like to hold a public hearing just to get input from the neighbors on this, the redesign. We're basically like, if you're coming now from Medford and taking a right onto Highland Ave, you can probably go 40 miles an hour without hitting the brakes.
At least.
I mean, at least, right? And so it's a funky intersection because Marchant Road comes out as well, so we have to kind of redesign Marchant Road and Highland Ave at the same time. So we're really kind of bumping that whole area out and creating a big green space in there and forcing more of a T intersection for people to turn onto Highland Ave. But again, we'd like to get public input before we go too far in the design process. We're at 25% now. And I'd like to do the hearing sooner rather than later in case we do get the Complete Streets funding so we can get the project constructed in the necessary time. So that's another one that I'll be requesting a hearing from you.
Great.
The next one is Ridge Street at Laughlin Road. So back in 2017, we had a letter from a resident of 62 Ridge Street, which is at the corner of Pepper Hill Drive, concerned about the speed and volume of traffic on Ridge Street. We've had similar letters many times over the years. Usually when we get these letters, the safety officer will put the radar, the traveling radar sign out for a little while, and that helps to calm things down a little bit. This again is one of our projects that we had in the prioritization plan for this Complete Streets program. last year I requested money from capital planning for the redesign of this intersection. It wasn't funded, so I'm gonna request funding again for the design of that intersection. I'd like to kind of get it in the queue so that we can continue to try to apply for Complete Streets funding at that location. I think it's probably gonna be a larger effort in terms of getting community feedback in terms of what we want to do with this intersection, because there's a lot of moving pieces with the fire station, the field, and the farm. So there's gonna have to be a lot of community input into whatever design we finally come up with. So this is really, again, just an update for you on where things are, and hopefully we'll get the capital.
Great, you guys are looking at that.
Yeah. Again, it's been on the list forever, it's just a matter of kind of check things off. The next one in 2017, October 2017, we got an email from a resident of Central Street concerned about the volume of speed and traffic going through her street, and concerned that people were using the street to avoid the signal at Church, Bacon, and Fletcher. I have the traffic counters out there right now, so I would expect that we may be back in front of you with.
Which part of Central, both?
Yeah, so I think we put it at one. We put it on closer to the Bacon Street side, and we may move it and do a second count further down the street, so we both kind of get both sides.
Yeah. It might be different.
Yeah. Okay, Myrtle Street. So we had as you're all maybe aware, Jackie, we were part of the board at the time, but the board voted a series of traffic calming improvements on Myrtle Street last year, several which have been installed. So there's a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, a do not enter sign from Mystic Valley Parkway onto Myrtle Street. And as part of that, we did a temporary speed bump last fall. We took it out over the winter months. So there's been some conversation back and forth with the residents this spring about whether that speed bump would be installed either temporarily again or on a more permanent basis. We collected some traffic data to kind of evaluate where things are earlier this spring. Overall, the do not enter sign really decreased the number of cars that were coming down Myrtle Street, so there's been a huge improvement there. It was approximately 113 cars, and now it's down to 66 cars. So I think that's been overall very good for the neighbors. There was a slight decrease in the 85th percentile speed. So previously it was closer to 30 miles an hour, and now we're down to closer to 25. So I think the question for the board is whether you want to look at having a more dedicated policy to where we install these sort of traffic humps, speed bumps, speed tables, that type of thing, and whether this is a location that you want to move forward in the future for consideration.
Do we have any speed tables right now?
We do not have any speed tables in town right now. No, but that's part of the, and I'll get to this in a minute, one of the improvements that's proposed along Woodside Road is a speed table at that location near the ponds.
Because we had the temporary speed bump there was some complaints about the
It's
noise
noisy.
from going over it, so
Yeah.
potentially, a speed table solution, although it's not a big space,
Yeah, I mean, I think typically I think of a speed table more at a location where you have a crosswalk.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure, again, it's certainly possible, but, we should probably have a kind of overarching policy for how we prioritize these.
Yeah,
sorts of
I think one of the discussions that came out of the traffic advisory group last year was that we should consider speed humps or speed bumps or tables, but I don't think we ever got into the question that Beth is asking is, do we have standards for, how big, what shape, where, things like that? And we probably ought to, it's a little bit of gathering some work from Tool and others to say, because there's a slew out there. I've flown across a couple of them.
Yeah, and I think just
We ought to probably decide what's best for Winchester and tighten down to say where we want to do them. Because the DPW and the police are not hugely enthusiastic about them.
Or the fire department, right?
Fire department, yeah, are not hugely enthusiastic about them, although they're generally not going 50 miles an hour up Myrtle Street, but.
I think it would be helpful to kind of develop a prioritization scale system for where we would install these types of systems, what's the speeds in those areas, what's the if there's any schools or whatever the kind of overriding factors are in the neighborhood, so we can kind of say, prioritize where, so that, every street between Washington Street and Highland Ave.
So
could be
this
coming
is
into
something you and the
request. Yeah.
advisory committee are gonna chew on in the next month, okay.
Okay, the next one is Highland Avenue potential corridor improvements. So there was a letter that came forward early this year from a resident who lives on the corner of Highland Ave and Wolcott with some recommendations for traffic calming improvements along Highland Ave. It's a pretty comprehensive set of improvements that I think they're recommending, so I think it would make the most sense at this point for us to hire a consultant to kind of do a corridor study in that area and evaluate overall. We did a similar thing a few years ago on North Main Street, evaluate overall kind of the conditions.
Yeah, and there the issue isn't only speed, right, it's volume.
I think it's both, really.
Well, I'm not excluding one or the other, but
Yeah.
I think it's both, right? Because
Yeah.
especially in the morning.
Yeah,
You got mile-long queues
I
in
know,
peak
that-
period,
yeah,
and 50
so-
mile an hour travel
right.
in the evening.
Yeah, right. So I think kind of need an overarching look at that corridor.
Okay, so you could initiate a corridor study with your professional services?
I could, I mean, I have a limited budget, so I'm not sure it could potentially wipe out
Richard's-
my whole, it could wipe out my whole FY19 budget potentially, so I think that's something that we need to,
Think about phasing it or do something.
yeah, I mean, we could get a scope of services and see if it's something we want to submit to capital, or if there's something could be funded in-house.
I mean,
So
in some-
where do we land on that one?
Well, so I guess the question is, how this falls into the priorities with the TTAC committee, and whether you wanna wait to hear what sort of their priorities are, and if this is high on the list, and we wanna work their list in terms of how we prioritize our money for studies, that type of thing, so.
We've had similar requests from Pond Street, from High Street and Lockland, and obviously the, Main Street, some of that area is congested too, so I guess I would
I
suggest.
think if I may, we could dovetail into, if we could get it on Capital's list, right? If we can see what get a report from Capital on what all the issues are, what studies are needed across town for traffic issues,
Almost like
right?
a
That
master
would-
plan for traffic.
Yeah, exactly, just to,
Figure out
You
where
might
to
wanna
put it,
think-
but.
rather
the island
than
affects
one
so
at a
many
time,
residents.
right?
You might wanna think too, similar to what you've done with the capital maintenance, that maybe you allocate $50,000 a year for traffic studies, just so there's some kind of pool of money out there that people can dip into, do these types of studies.
Yeah. I
And
mean-
not have to wait a year through the capital process to
Yeah.
initiate it.
But rather, because making a decision on one and without seeing what other possible needs are there for traffic, I'd like to have a view and see
Yeah,
if
I think
it's,
that's-
do we need $30,000? Do we need $300,000?
I think that's the charge that we've given to the Traffic Advisory Committee, and Beth has said she'd rather get
Yeah.
programs with priorities than scattershot stuff that
Yeah.
comes into us, so that would be much in line with what you're suggesting.
Just ask a question, because I know it's talked about at TTAC, but when you're talking Highland Avenue, you have an issue with that traffic light at Highland and South Dakota Road, which isn't under our control, so where does DRC come into our discussion?
I think if we figured out a solution, we could probably encourage DRC to retime it. I think Jay has said they're very stretched, and if we were to say, here's the plan and here's what we need, they probably would say, fine, but we don't know what the problem is there, or whether it can be corrected easily by retiming it. Yeah.
Right, well, that was discussed at TTAC, and I'm just kind of curious, I got the feeling that DRC was not willing to have discussions with us, so we were low on their consideration.
I think it's just difficult to find somebody at DCR to talk to. It's not that they're unwilling to talk to us, it's just making
You can
that
always
contact.
unlock and reprogram the cabinets, so. And more of these, I don't know whether that one, more and more of these signals are now on computer controlled from a central location, and they can be reprogrammed. It's just you have to get somebody to pay attention to say what should be, and that would, I guess, be the outcome of if this were a priority corridor, that would, one of the recommendations of the engineering firm would be to say, retime it and do X, so, yeah. Ben, did you comment?
Yeah, I would, just as a resident, would advocate for carving out the system. budget for traffic surveys as a minimum. As a member of the committee that was meeting downstairs, we do have high expectations. We don't want to make decisions that aren't based in fact. And getting those types of studies are consistently our number one stop. And we don't want to spend that money unwisely. But the group, we've been talking about the same priorities for a couple of years now. There are all the priorities that you guys have spoken about even here today. And, you know, I think having a budget set aside for more consistent studies to help us advocate in the right place and put our money in the right place, I think that makes a lot of sense for the town.
So I would expect Mr. Whitehead and the committee will come back to us and give us good reasons and good recommendations and pressure us to find the money. Okay. Woodside?
Woodside. So the town is scheduled to receive $175,000 through the Eversource MOU for the 115 project for improvements around Winter Pond. During the conversation leading up to the development of the MOU, we've talked about both landscaping improvements, environmental improvements around the ponds, as well as traffic calming improvements. Staff gave Richard a memo a couple months ago at this point, I guess, outlining what our thoughts would be in terms of prioritizing those. There's more projects than we have money budget for in the 175. So that 175 would cover both design and construction ideally, unless we are able to find additional funding to
And is
match
this
with
between the two ponds
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it really goes from Wildwood Street to Pond Street with improvements along that corridor.
Okay.
So I think probably the next step is to get together the citizens who were involved in that initial process and figure out what the priorities are moving forward. We've gotten a preliminary cost estimate from Tool in terms of what we think our priorities or staff's thoughts on the priorities would be, and that we can use that to kind of gauge how much of that 175 would be eaten up by design, and how much could be left over for construction. We obviously have a few years here because
Is that something that you and Jim want to initiate with, I see Carolyn?
We've already been talking with Mark Toogood about setting up a joint meeting between staff and the Friends of Winter Pond and other, local citizenry that would be involved and looking at that. What would be the priorities? How do we best spend that $175,000?
Okay, so that's underway. Carolyn, have you?
Yeah, one other point that I'd like to bring up while we're discussing Woodside Road is that I'm Caroline Woodward, I live on Woodside Road, I'm going to stand up. That the group of neighbors that I've been discussing these traffic problems with have been asking if it would be possible to get some sort of temporary facsimile of particularly the amendment that Tool proposed for the intersection of Woodside and Wildwood. Because Eversource has been telling us for 5 years that they're going to start this project in a year, and we really have no idea when this money is going to come through and we're going to actually get this project built. It's likely to be a number of years from now. In the meantime, I'm sure you guys have all driven through the Wildwood-Woodside intersection. It's very confusing, especially for people that don't live in Winchester, because the turning road actually has the right of way, and the straight of way has a stop sign, and there's been a number of accidents there. Neighbors have lost trees because people are actually driving up on the sidewalk and taking out their trees. It's a very highly used intersection for school children, and we've discussed this a number of times, this idea of maybe just that one intersection, putting in something with temporarily straw wattles or something else. I believe Jay Gill said that he could pull it off if he had your approval, so I'm asking if we can put that on the table tonight and see what you all think about that.
I'm sorry, what would it be?
Well, in the Tool report, the way that they thought the best way to deal with that intersection, can I draw?
There's nothing to draw with.
There's something to draw with. Okay, so basically, Wildwood comes down and does a 45-degree turn, and then Woodside comes straight off of that. And people treat this as a straightaway, and they blow through there, although it's a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, they blow through there at very high rates of speed. Tool has proposed basically a bump out in between Woodside, and there's like a little dirt road that comes in there. just to sort of bump that out and redefine, make Wildwood more obviously the main road, and then Woodside, it would be more like a T intersection. You'd have to really slow down and turn to get from Wildwood to Woodside rather than that straightaway.
I see.
So it would slow people down considerably. It would also reduce the amount of confusion that the Uber and Lyft drivers that are driving through our neighborhood and don't know where they are experience, and causes a lot of accidents.
Okay. So I think at this point, rather than bring it directly to us, I would basically suggest that we follow through on the committee's suggestion that we look at the priorities, look at the designs, and then have Beth come. And if there's a temporary pilot design for it, then you could certainly bring that to us and we could look at it.
Would putting that temporary speed bump at that, across Woodside at the corner help for now until Eversource?
I don't think a speed bump would
There
really
was a pump
solve.
out and a speed
No,
bump.
the temporary speed bump that we had on Myrtle, that's.
Yeah, it's really, it's more of a turning movement issue,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, I don't think the speed limit.
Thank you.
Again, just from the cheat sheets, I live on Westland, which is probably the biggest cut through in the town. It would not occur to me to ask for a stop sign in the middle of Westland, which is where I live. We have physical barriers that we're stuck with. There's only two ways to get from the east side of town over to the west side of town. You either come across Pond Street or you come across Church Street. And then there's a wrinkle through the ponds. The cemetery is there, we're not gonna move it. Horn Pond is there, we're not gonna move it. You can't get to Lexington except for by two ways. You know, we're physically constrained. And I think, you know, it's nice that, I sympathize with the neighborhoods. You know, we keep our kids off Westland Avenue, people are driving 50 miles an hour all the time. But, you know, it impacts the whole town, so it's not just what's going on in the neighborhood. You know, it's hard to get from one side of the town to the other, and we can't keep constricting.
I think in the discussions we've had over the last year, we recognize that. I think the key focus that I'm hearing from people out of this and the things is speed.
Yeah.
Is not to necessarily to reduce the number of cars that can move through or the volume. That's going to be difficult, but to keep people from running through these intersections at 40 or 50 miles an hour.
Especially that one where there's so many kids, you know, from.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a crossing guard there for Lynch, so, I mean, and it's a problem.
It's a
We
tough
have
job.
major barriers in the town.
Yep, no, I think this is,
They're in the
again,
wrong place.
this is, I think the discussion people had earlier was, there are few roads, if the speeding's the problem, we have to address that first. If we begin diverting, you simply move it from one corridor or one thing to another, and you want to be careful about that, so. Okay, so on this issue, I think we're talking about sorting out the priorities for the whole Woodside corridor and perhaps coming back sooner rather than later with a proposal for a pilot to,
Yeah, we can talk to Tool about what it would take
to
do
change
that
the configuration of
temporarily
the.
in a safe way.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
I think my only concern with the temporary fix is doing something that can be safely put there all winter. I think it can be
So we could
confusing
come
if
with
we
two
put
of
something out for a few months and then take it
Yeah.
away and then try to put it back in the spring.
There's always Jersey barriers, they look really good. Okay, let's move on because we're running late.
So the last one is the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit change across town. So this has proven to be a little bit more complicated than originally thought. If you recall, I guess it was back in fall of 17, we approved, we enacted the enabling legislation at town meeting to allow the town to adopt this 25-mile-per-hour town-wide speed limit. It's kind of a misnomer because it's not actually town-wide, it's just wherever it is not officially posted regulatory speed limit. So what is the regulatory speed limits in Winchester, you ask? That is a good question. So I went back to the source, MassDOT, and got the regulations that have been adopted by the state in the town, dating back to the 60s. And they are something that nobody's going to be happy about. 35 mile per hour is on Washington Street, 35 mile per hour on Highland Ave, 35 mile per hour on Johnson Road. So we're in the process of kind of compiling all that information and putting it in one place and trying to reconcile it with the signage that's actually out there, which in many cases is conflicting. So I think as part of the 25 mile per hour town-wide, we're gonna wanna go back and reconcile some of those places where we see 35 mile per hour in places that is A, not posted for 35 mile per hour right now, and B, not someplace that we're gonna want 35 mile per hour. Changing a regulatory speed limit is a little bit more difficult process. It has to actually, you have to do an engineering study and go back to the state with it, so it's not something this board can adopt on your own. So what I'm recommending is that we hire a tool, and I can do that through my professional services budget, to help us kind of navigate this MassDOT protocol and to put forward that engineering study.
And I think I heard from Beth's earlier discussion we had on this, I think in discussing it with Tool and Tool discussing it with MassDOT, is we probably don't need to do a detailed study on every location that's out there, but if we had a certified traffic engineer, you know, working with Beth to say, these were at 35, they should be at 30, or something like that. But they would probably say, if you write that down, send us a stamped letter, we'll, you know, we'll approve it and the board can go ahead.
I'm hopeful that will be the case in most places.
But we didn't want to find out that we were arbitrarily declaring a place 30 and find out that somebody ran off the road and it was still set at 35 or something like that.
So then after that process, the town would be sort of like 30 or 25 kind of thing?
So I think we need to decide, again, we need to look at the map that we put together and figure out where the places that we wanted to drop it to 25 or we wanted to keep it 30, how that matches up with what the existing speed limit is out there. If it's a regulatory speed limit, then we have to go back to MassDOT. If it's not, then the board has control to vote that 25 in those areas.
Okay.
But there may also be places we want to take it down to 20 by
That's
school
right.
zones.
Yep, so again, I think.
You know, it's just not either 25
Right.
or 30, there may be places where we want to take it down.
Which I think we need to have a letter, sort of an engineering study, and I think we can have Tool help us put that together. Yeah. So it's gonna be, unfortunately, it's gonna be a little bit of a process, but I think we can get through it.
Yeah, and I think as we discussed at town meeting, it's not, I wouldn't anticipate that everybody will suddenly observe a 25 or 30 mile posted limit. But Winchester is now the only town around us who did not have that posting. So I don't want Waze to show up and say, hey, Winchester's the high-speed corridors, there's nothing posted. So part of this is to provide some uniformity and also to rationalize the postings that we do or don't have out there. We've got places where there are signs of different speeds on different sides of the road, places where there are no signs.
Which is how it was adopted.
Yeah.
When then you go back and you look at those speed regulations, it doesn't
So
make sense.
we got several steps before we can rationalize it, but we would hold a public hearing, I think,
Yeah.
as we promised town meeting. David?
So the process would be, you said an engineering report, traffic, townwide?
So just in the areas where there are regulatory speed limits in place, so it's not everywhere, it's just.
Any
it's mostly-
ballpark on, like, what that engineering report might?
I'm hopeful it'd be under 10 or 15,000. I think I should be able to cover it in my professional services budget.
Just out of
for next
curiosity,
year.
what is it, that $400,000 grant?
Complete streets.
Yeah,
Complete streets, so,
would that be
no, that's for construction only.
construction? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We did file, May 1st, we filed a new grant application, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get some funding
Great,
there.
great job on that.
Okay, good. So unless there are other board questions, marathon run, thank you very much. We'll have a lot of stuff to
Through the
schedule.
chairman, I just wanted to thank you so much, Beth, and everyone who's come tonight, who's on this, because most people in Winchester, these kind of traffic issues are extremely important to them, and your thorough report and all the efforts of everyone here tonight are so important to the town and highly appreciated by the board, so thank you so much. It's a lot of effort.
Good, thank you.
John, one thing, in terms of this speed limit, I think a key factor here is going to be a public relation campaign or some public information outreach to inform people of the changes and where the changes are. And you know, again, I don't think we all expect instant compliance, but hopefully we can get some compliance.
Okay.
And so TTAC will probably come back to you with some recommendations on that, once we get more formal, further down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think the board really appreciate the TTAC and the TRC and the Beth's office beginning to make some organized priorities out of this whole thing, because And probably in the past, we've gotten away with a sign here and a fix there, but I think that as we've heard over the last couple of years, the volume of traffic has been rising as the economy has been recovering, and they seem to all be routing themselves through everybody's neighborhood, and it's pretty aggressive in some cases, so having a kind of a more comprehensive traffic program would be great. And we really hope you'll come up with some brilliant solutions. So, okay, good. With the board's permission, I'll take up item 3, which is registrars of voters. We need to appoint one Republican representative to a term to expire in March 2026. Mr. Conte and Mr. Miller are here tonight. I don't know if they want to. We have three people who've been proposed for this position, 2 lawyers and a CPA business analyst. I don't know. Do you want to speak to your preferences? Do you want to, otherwise it's sort of up to the board to, I think, make the appointment, but if you'd like to, you and John. John's recovered from Saturday night. We weren't going to hold a formal public hearing on this, but if you'd like to make quick comments, so. Or you can.
I'd be happy with whoever the board decides to pick. I think both of us are more
We're rooting for the other.
Yeah, okay, well, so Barbara should win?
Yeah, correct.
I don't know, I've been involved with elections before I was registered to vote, and I served as a vice chairman of the Republican Town Committee. I was a state committee man. I was a city councilor for 10 years. I've run for the state rep and state senator, so I've had plenty of experience with elections.
Okay.
I've been involved in recounts even.
I guess, is there any, would we run into any problems with you being both a registrar and on the town meeting committees? I suspect not, but I just thought I'd ask.
I don't think so, but, whatever the board's preference might be.
Yeah, and I think Tony is the most qualified of the 3. So I certainly see the matter, and I deny that I am a lawyer. I've gone back to being an engineer, so.
A recovered lawyer?
As you can see, I'm commenting on traffic.
The question is,
Civil engineer.
do we want 2 lawyers in this
So,
job?
no, I'm not, but I think we'd be happy with whatever you decide.
And there's just
Do
one
we have,
spot?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's just one spot? Is that
Yes.
correct?
There's one spot, we have 3 applicants, Barbara Shagog, who's served on the FinCom, and I think Mariano and others know her well. We have 2 lawyers and somebody who can count. I'm not sure which skill is.
He keeps denigrating me.
I'm just,
I went to engineering
once a
school, I
lawyer,
can
it never
count.
rubs off. Do we have any questions to other the,
Have either one of you been on, have been appointed as to the registrar of voters before?
No, I haven't.
No? John? No?
I think there was someone in that office for years.
Yeah.
Peg Perrin.
Peg, yeah, Peg
For
Perrin.
years.
Okay.
It's not a, it's a sinecure, Selectman Betancourt.
so, sort of a coin flip? Does one of the board members want to make do you want to withdraw your candidacy?
No, we can move, we can let you
Just to
decide
be
without
friends
us.
after?
Of course, absolutely. No, the 3
You
of
want
us
to arm
are.
wrestle or something?
Yeah, I mean,
We do not.
who wants this the least?
No, it's an important job, and
I
I think.
understand. We
I
have
think
2 qualified candidates, and who's,
And Barb is very qualified too, and, but as I said, I think Tony is actually the most qualified.
Okay. So
I haven't heard that, Mr. Chairman, again, both outstanding candidates, but I'd make a motion to nominate Mr. Conti, the Register of Voters, Republican appointee.
Second.
Seconded.
Term to expire March 31st, 2021.
Mr. Conte, is the last opportunity for you to withdraw your proposed candidacy. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, ayes have it. Sorry about that, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Okay.
Thank you for the time.
Well, we're glad we were to stay all night. So municipal stormwater permits, we left off one of our previous discussions on the question of how to allocate cost responsibility. Whether a smaller house that is less, a smaller property where the house has less permeable surface should be charged less than a large house. This would be, I think, irrespective of the actual lot size. The question is how much permeable surface are you covering? I think the Weston Sampson folks were suggesting we have a one-size-fits-all rate, and we had
Correct.
said, is that work or not? So I guess if we,
What would it take to delineate
yeah,
according to lot size? And you've got the memorandum and a quotation for those services. So, a little bit of context, we keep reminding you that the effort here is to be able to have you roll this decision into the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund rate-setting activity for water rates and sewer rates for your November meeting, your fall town meeting, 2018. We explained that the MS4 permitting obligation has now come back online, so as of July 1st here, you've got the obligation to begin compliance. So we were telling you that we would put the entire team before you again, before you come to that decision-making point to, to establish a policy for the fall. This was, I think, Mariano had asked for a potential alternative way of breaking out the potential fee collection for MS4 activity, and they're telling you that to do it this way would be about $24,000.
So would this would be a one-time charge?
Yeah.
We would have then a survey of the impervious cover of every residential lot and commercial lot of every,
Yeah, so there was always a tiered price proposed for the non-residential.
For the
lot.
commercial.
They proposed a flat fee for the residential
Right.
units.
okay. And so this would give us the impervious cover of every residential unit?
It would, yeah.
Okay, and it would be a one-time charge, and then after that, we could update that database based on permits, building permits pulled, or?
No, so a lot of the things that change your impervious area don't require building permits.
Right.
So
Like driveways and,
patios, decks, sheds, so
So-
we have to develop a way in which to track this going forward.
so we have a bylaw on amount of impervious cover that you can have,
Yes.
right? That was passed just, a year and a half ago?
Yep.
Town meeting? So how do we enforce that right now if we don't know what the impervious cover of a residence is and we don't track any changes by patios or things like that?
If you come in for a permit.
yeah, it's basically done on a permit basis, so it covers a small
Yeah, but if
sample.
you put in a big
Anything
driveway
that-
or,
Yeah, anything that is pre-existing is grandfathered in, and then anything that comes in with a permit covers that topic according to the
but I
zoning
thought,
bylaw.
I
So there
thought,
are things that you can do that by right, that you
Yeah,
don't need a permit.
that you don't need a permit for.
right, so then we can't track compliance
Can't-
with the
Not
bylaw,
necessarily, but,
as far as it.
yeah.
impervious
You just
cover.
need similar to your assessment process that you do with the assessor's office, you probably need a mechanism maybe to go out and survey so many annually if you wanted to keep up.
Something,
Yeah, exactly. So, could hire somebody to do it, staff, if we could find the time, which would probably, not, if you had a very aggressive effort each year, so many, you got 6,500 parcels, as Dave has mentioned here. It'd be hard to keep track of all of them. 7,000 parcels.
I'm also concerned
Count the
with
500
the
that have been-
initial effort, because like you said, once you, that 24,000 you have to work, it's the long-term maintenance of that, and I don't know how we would keep up with that.
Maybe we buy a couple more drones, we fly them over the neighborhood,
But somebody has to post-process that data and figure out the area.
Exactly, you gotta use the
drone
data.
just gives you a picture.
There's a lot of software out there now. The military has developed lots and lots of it, and it's coming through the Googles that do sort of an automated process
Yeah.
of looking at building stuff. But I guess the second question we have would be, if we did the survey, we'd know the distribution of sizes, and then we would have a policy decision about how we want one tier is proposed. do
Well, you
want
see a
2
couple of
tiers, 3
examples
tiers,
in
and
here
they
that
got a
Dave
couple
has given you, right?
examples,
Yeah.
so-
Milton and Northampton.
Well, I guess Jackie, you had your hand up.
Okay, I'll be quick. So, having just come off the planning board, we, have impervious surface, just data as part of our kind of, review for a lot of, permit applications. So I'm certainly familiar with the term, but I apologize, but, and maybe it'll be helpful for anyone watching WinCam. So is the town considering, so we have sewer fees, water fees, and impervious
Yep.
surface fee essentially, so it would be a third component, and that would go into stormwater
Yeah,
enterprise fund?
the recommendation would be, in order to cover your obligations under the MS4 process, that you introduce a fee-based system within the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund as an effort to be able to.
And this would be, so essentially like going forward into the future, almost like another fee?
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, and the idea is that right now, the town pays for all kinds of costs with respect to stormwater, but then this would be fund, an enterprise fund.
Yeah,
And then these would be, like these examples from Milton and Northampton, they would be on an annual basis, is that fair
annual,
to say?
yeah. Right.
And so they're very different, so Milton goes by size of property, the way I understand this. I don't know if Beth, you might wanna come up with a
It's,
figure or not.
it goes, has those tiers, Jackie.
Yeah, no, I understand the
so-
tiers, but I'm
yeah.
just saying the whole basis of the formula is different. So, so in other words, Milton, if I understand this correctly, is just simply by the size of
Of
property, or is this by the
impervious
size
surface.
of the impervious surface?
So we did and I apologize because you weren't on the board when we did this, but we did an analysis with Weston Sampson and the Abrahams Group, who works with the town on our water and sewer enterprise fund
Yep.
right now, which actually, we fund stormwater and drainage projects out of the water and sewer
I get
enterprise
it,
fund as well.
yeah.
So there was an analysis done about a couple options about ways in which we could generate, develop a
it,
rate
I get it.
structure.
Yeah, I understand.
And so all those rate structures that we looked at previously had a flat fee for residential units and some of
See-
them had a flat fee for all other parcels, so commercial, industrial,
I get that,
condo,
yeah.
and some of them had a tiered, structure for those non.
I'm just looking at, these seem totally different, so with Milton, is it just, it looks like it's by parcel size, whereas in Northampton, these are simply examples, I understand that.
It's the square footage
But
of
it's
the
by
impervious surface,
Well,
Jackie.
no,
They're
first of all,
both- they're both
hold on a second, can I just finish my
different.
question? I can definitely read, but I'm just trying to pinpoint my question for you, and I apologize because I don't want to take the chair's time, so that's why I'm trying to be quick. So with Milton, it looks like they're looking at the overall parcel size, unless I have that wrong.
No, that's
Whereas in
the
Northampton,
impervious.
it's impervious. You're saying Milton is also impervious?
Milton's also
So
impervious.
residential area could have 15,000 or greater impervious, interesting, okay. Okay,
Just-
and so what are you thinking about, like at this point, would make the most sense for Winchester?
My personal recommendation
Yeah.
would be to stick with a flat fee for the residential units and to
And
do a
fl-
tiered fee for the other structures.
Okay, and the flat fee for residential would be based on simply a flat fee, or would that be tied to something?
It's based on a flat fee. So we had, the options that we looked at was ranging from $75 to $150.
Annual.
The
Do we
issue-
know that Milton says by impervious square feet? Because for Northampton, it's actually spelled out that it's impervious area,
I
whereas
was curious.
for Milton, it appears to
Looks
just
like
be
it's
square
size.
footage of the structure.
No, I believe it's both impervious.
Okay,
Well, so the issue we got into last time is if we do a flat fee for residential structure, if I have a very small house, 500-foot house and that's it, somebody has a 5,000 square foot house, we're both gonna be paying exactly the same
I know, but if
rate.
you have, on the house size, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
so this
thought you were
is
gonna
the
say lot
house
size.
and the driveway, let's say, that you
Yeah.
can easily measure. I could have, forget the lot size, but if I cover 500 feet, if I'm responsible for 500, I'm gonna pay exactly the same fee that if somebody has 5 or 10 or 15,000, things like that. And the downside of that seems to me, one is equity. Why am I paying, if I've only covered 500 square feet, why am I paying the same guy who's paying 50,000? So, and the other issue is there's no then economic incentive for the homeowner to think twice about repaving. I mean,
Oh, there is,
well, there is, but
because-
but he's gonna be, but if I have a huge house, I'm saying, I'm paying, of the flat rate, I'm paying the same as somebody who would have a small
That
house.
seems to be a bigger concern than the other one, but in any event,
So
because
that-
the other
that
one
was the
is,
issue we
once you
got
get
into.
reviewed, yeah.
So I think that the key distinguisher in my mind is that regardless of how much impervious area there is on an individual property, you still have to meet the permit requirements. So it's not like flooding where if you reduce your impervious area, the town eventually, can improve our flooding. This is more that the town has to meet this permit requirement. It's not, it's a water quality based permit, so it's not, a flood based, you know, it's not how much stormwater runoff we're generating. And so the less, you know, everybody is paying a little bit more when there's fewer people paying into it.
You know, but I think, again, we, with property assessments, we pay tax based, there's a tax rate, but we pay based on the size and scale of the house. The value of the house, which is a proxy for its size. In this case, we're talking about, are we assessing all houses basically at the same value for this MS4, or are we providing one tier, two tier, three tiers? I mean, I think Milton seems to have gone a little bit.
So can we go somewhere in the middle? Where we have the square footage of the houses, and I know that that's not exactly the impervious cover, because you have houses that are 2 stories, 3 stories might have, but it is it's a proxy for the size that it takes up on the footprint.
But if
So-
you have a large house that's on a large piece of property, you're technically, you have more impervious surface, percentage-wise.
Yeah.
So like with the planning board, we do it by percentage. So we take the square footage of the lot and the square footage of the footprint of the house, and then that's a percentage.
So how do you have the percent, oh, but you don't have it for every property in
So
town?
in other words, if you have a huge
It's only when
house
you get
that's
a
on
permit
huge piece of property, then,
When
right.
it comes
It's only
before
when,
the-
it's only when a permit comes, when a special permit
Right,
comes.
which
Yeah,
is
it's,
the
you don't
downside.
have the whole, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I would say is, what if we did something like Milton here, but instead of impervious area is square footage, which is in the database of the assessor's office.
Yep.
It's funny, you
Right, so
gotta,
then-
you gotta assume Milton's is overall square footage, because how come you have 15,000 square feet?
Yeah, we
of
definitely,
impervious,
we
unless
have,
it's industrial,
no,
Maybe-
you can,
Yeah, maybe we,
It's a very large house.
rather than commissioning,
or
we
long driveway.
follow up on Mariano's idea, rather than commissioning a study right now, could we ask the assessor to run us a distribution table to show how many, I don't know what, distribution of house size, or whatever they have, footprint property? Because it really doesn't relate to the lot, which is what,
It does relate to the lot.
well, it does and it doesn't, but
No,
we're
it does,
charging
because you have
people.
more impervious surface.
No, well, not, well, if you assume you have more,
I mean, you have more pervious surface.
yeah, but we're basically charging people on the value, on the impervious in this case. So,
does the assessor have the footprint, or do they have the overall square footage of the,
They have the square footage of the
Dave
lot
is
and
the
the home.
expert.
but not the footprint? There's a difference, right?
Correct.
No, they have the dimensions, they have the dimensions.
The dimensions, so there would be a process.
Right, you can, just like what we did on the planning board.
But
A little geometry to,
but they have the total square footage as well.
they have, right, but that doesn't equate to the
No,
footprint.
right, so it's not a perfect number, but it's an
Impervious includes
approximation
terraces and
without having to
driveways.
go
Porches.
through.
What I'm gonna.
The whole study.
What I'm gonna suggest is maybe we simply ask the assessor to run a data run on it and just plot out like a histogram. How many houses are 500, 600, 700,000 aggregate feet, and just see what the distribution is as a step. Because we,
Did the planning board do that as part of your?
Well, I was gonna say that you'd be surprised because, like a lot of duplex lots, where they have like multiple driveways and terraces, I mean, those were some of the concerns, and they're relatively smaller lots, but the impervious surface is like most of the lot.
you know,
So it really varies, like you can't even assume, because as I was saying, if you have a large piece of property, no matter what size your house is, you have less, you have more pervious surface. Even if the house size is large.
yeah, but
So-
again, we're basically looking here at, planning board, look at the percentage. Here, we're just basically saying, we're billing you for having impervious surface, right?
No, but that's what the planning board was looking at.
No,
That's what
no,
they-
we're not billing
Different
for,
animal.
not for impervious percentage,
We're looking
but
at
just for total,
square,
for
impervious
absolute
square footage.
impervious surface, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if it's 90%.
On an acre
of your
lot
property,
or,
on an acre
Or
or.
10% of your property. If it's 5,000 square feet, then that's more than 1,000 square feet, even if
Well,
the
it's sort of
1,000
a
square
funny
feet.
thing,
is-
that's like purely academic, because what's at issue here is runoff, right?
No, what's
No.
at issue here is how do we collect the fees that we need for the MS4
I know,
permit
but
compliance,
what your
right?
overall, the whole point of this is what's runoff. So a lot that has more pervious surface is absorbing it more.
Yeah, but if we,
So it's
yes,
basically hardscape. That's another
correct,
word
yeah.
for it, so.
So we wanna know roughly, what's the distribution of hardscape? Maybe square footage is the first approximation. What's the distribution of that? And then how do we divide that up? Do we just say everybody, I don't care whether you're 500 or 5,000 feet of impervious surface on your lot, I'm gonna charge you the same? Or do we wanna say if you're, if you take a little hardscape together, you got small amount of impervious surface, you wanna charge them less than somebody who's got 5,000 square feet of impervious surface?
I mean, really Northampton, I guess, is their approach where they're doing the square footage that's impervious, is doing basically what our planning board does.
Yeah,
Well, no, because they're not taking, because it could be, somebody could have 2,000 square feet of impervious surface on a 2,200 square foot lot, and that's 90% impervious, but they are in the bottom tier, where somebody could have 5,000 square feet of impervious surface, they're in the top tier, even if they have a 50,000 square foot lot, and they're only 10%. So they're going by just total amount of impervious surface, not by percentage.
yeah, which is, I think, what we wanna be doing, and the question is, how do we wanna divide that up? Do we just, I mean, Northampton appeals to me as only 3 categories.
And that's for 1 to 3 families.
4.
I'm just reading the definition,
One-
residential, 1 to 3
Okay.
families.
I mean, could we, with deference to the town engineer who's, has a specialty in this area, I mean, maybe we could start with like 2 tiers or something? I mean, this is like a
Yeah, I mean,
first tier process.
Sure, you can,
And see how it
dividing,
goes.
the initial step of dividing into the tiers is just an academic exercise. That's not the difficult part. It's the long-term tracking and maintenance of that data. And I think before we make a decision, if you're gonna do a tiered system, we have to set up the system for how we will track and maintain that. Otherwise, it's not fair to anybody.
Yeah, but I
So
also-
to me, that's the critical part of the
But
conversation.
again, I think that's the administrative part of it. The political problem is we're basically, as Jackie pointed out, we're adding another tax
Sure.
to people's
Yeah.
properties to deal with a real problem. But I wanna know if I'm gonna go out and tell people, hey, we're gonna tax you for stormwater runoff, they're gonna say to us, well, why am I with a 500 square foot of impervious surface being taxed at the same rate as somebody who's got, 15,000 square feet of impervious surface, And I think, on a pure equity basis, I'd like to see us, whether it's 2 tiers or 3 tiers or 4 tiers, I'd like to see something, otherwise people are gonna say, basically you're slamming me, inequitably.
Well, but take
And
into
we're gonna
account,
get a lot of blowback, I mean, this is kind of a user fee level. If you use up a big space of property as parking and things like that, you gotta pay for it.
but you do have to take into account Beth's overall
Yeah.
point, which is whether you produce any runoff or none, you still need a stormwater system. You have to be contributing, what you're really doing here is requiring people to contribute to the stormwater system,
Right, and I-
regardless of the volume of runoff that they produce.
Correct, we
Even
need,
people who have total pervious surfaces and they're.
Still need a
collecting-
stormwater system.
Yeah, like an undeveloped lot.
Yep,
then presumably they wouldn't have any impervious surface, right?
right. But you
Right,
still,
but-
need-
but
but
town manager's
you
point
still
is
need
that
a
it would
stormwater
still be
system.
restricted, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a base fee that everybody
Yeah,
pays,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then some
I mean,
people
that's
don't.
0 to 2,000.
Yeah, there's a base fee,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's-
So to bring it back to,
Yeah.
the question is, do you want Weston and Sampson to do this? Or it sounds like you want them to do some version,
So the
whether it's
issue-
Weston and Sampson or we do it, try to do it
To
internally
me,
to
the
get
issue
to
is that
the
if they're going to do this, then we have to have a process in place so that in future
Annual
years,
to be
so
able
we
to-
can maintain it,
right,
the
which
database.
we
so
don't
the
have the
data
answer to
doesn't-
that yet.
Right, we don't have the answer to that. My answer of trying to come in the middle is, okay, we can't, it's gonna be very costly to maintain a database of impervious surface
Yep.
per residential property. Let's use as a proxy to that, not an exact and perfect proxy, but as a proxy to that,
The
the
assessor.
square footage, the assessor's
This is it?
square footage.
Okay, so how about if we do this?
Square footage
Just so that we
of
can move
Of the
the,
house,
we
Of
can move the
house or
topical.
footprint?
of the house.
Ah.
Well,
Because we also don't have the footprint, I mean,
Well-
they have the footprint, but it's not in the database, the total, it
Dave,
would have to be calculated.
Can you take this total square footage of the house and so we divide by the number of stories?
Well,
As a-
again,
as a
so what
prudent-
I just don't know if it can be extracted, with Patriot Properties, as I recall now, they have a.
Give you a diagram.
Yeah.
They have a diagram, and then below they'll have, you know, some abbreviations for FFL would be first floor, you know, BAS basement, and then, so again, whether or not you could, if you wanted to have just first floor, and if you can extract those numbers, I don't know, that would be it.
Well, maybe we could we ask Dan to do a quick look at what he could extract, that would be
Yeah.
equivalent to the footprint? I mean, before I give $20,000 to Weston
the
and
funny thing
Sampson,
is
I'd like to see the
Yeah.
distribution
In a lot
of
of
sizes.
situations, the driveway and terraces can be larger
Yeah.
than the footprint of the house. So, and lots,
How about like, you know, big condo developments like Parkview or downtown where there's, you know, there is no, do they get, is it an equity issue? Or-
I think that the
Separate,
Parkview is
yeah.
separate, yeah.
Yeah,
and one of Dave's mechanisms, he called those larger facilities out
Right.
almost on a was it per square foot, Beth? Size?
Yeah.
well, I think it's a nice idea to, this was great, you had these two comparisons, but maybe see what other towns are doing.
Yeah, there
like
anybody else?
Lexington.
Or is
That's
this
what,
what you were able to
that's
get?
what we usually try to do.
So,
Maybe see
we
Brian
talked years, not years ago, it seems like years ago, months ago about the different options that have the single residential flat fee. The examples they gave you here were just cases where there are tiered residential fees. Everybody else seems to have
everybody else has a flat fee?
a flat fee for
Even like
residential.
Lexington?
I don't believe Lexington has a stormwater utility.
There aren't a lot of communities with a utility yet.
Oh, MS4 is a
Go
new,
right out front.
well, just MS4 is this is a new
So
thing.
Yeah.
Chicopee has one, Redding's had one for years, Newton has one. Obviously,
And they're not tiered?
Chelmsford, I think, is new, has one. None of those have tiered residential. They have tiered for non-residential, but not residential.
So I'd like to suggest that we I don't know whether Dave would volunteer to do this, but talk with Dan and see what could they pull out of their database
Security,
that would give us an approximation of the footprint,
yeah.
and then get him just to give us a distribution of those, how many, you know, would have a footprint of this size, so we
Yeah,
can
if
see
you, I mean, if you can give
if,
me a raw Excel spreadsheet, I can manipulate
Yeah.
the data.
if 90% of the houses are pretty much within a really narrow range of total footprint, then maybe one size fits all, but if they're spread out, you know, from 500 to 15,000 footprint, then we might want to divide it up into 2 or 3 or less, and we can take a quick
So
look
would
at it.
this also be, this would be like a bylaw, or?
To be in your water and sewer enterprise fund rates.
So therefore, we don't have to actually put it in the law, it's just rates?
Rates.
Unless the tax code changes and includes them.
Unless you wanted to adopt some sort of program where people could,
Or you
reduce
just stick
their,
with assessment?
reduce their overall fees, so if they were to, you know, put an infiltration system in or whatever else, they, you know, could apply for a reduction.
Right, just
That's
like with
pretty
assessments.
standard in other communities that they allow that.
I mean, is the, you know, the consideration here is on, for funding sources for the MS4?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just seems like, as good as the merits might be to do this, is it just, you know, it seems like there's a lot of, moving parts to that versus just, you know, having the water and sewer rates adjusted.
Could do that.
You know, it just seems like that's a quantifiable method, and this, you know, we'll talk to Dan, but it just seems like this concept, as well as the merits may be, it might just be fraught with too many moving parts.
So that was, when we presented the analysis a couple months ago, that was one of the alternatives we looked at, was that there's no stormwater fee, it's just you adjust the rates to.
Right, I think that's the, you know, again, I think that's the cleanest,
Yep.
most understandable. I could also see this being a real interesting response from citizens trying to figure it out, and an added tax versus just making the adjustment on the quantifiable water and sewer use.
Well, but this isn't tied to water and sewer use.
Well, okay.
This is square footage.
It's stormwater.
Yeah, I mean, how much water you use has nothing to do
Has
with how
nothing to
much.
do with- 'cause that's
flows.
in
But-
pipe.
It is,
But it's a ma-
but
it's
we fund
allowable.
everything
It's
out of
allowable.
the water and sewer enterprise fund,
Right.
so.
No, no, I understand, but putting it on the water rate or the sewer rate, right? I mean, how much water you use in your house has no impact to the stormwater system, right? I mean, you're using the water system and you're using the sewer
Sewer
system,
Right.
but not the stormwater system.
But you can reduce your fee by reducing your water usage.
Sure.
So, I mean, right now, we fund stormwater and drainage projects out of that enterprise fund, and so people are paying for those with their water and sewer rates.
Right, but what's nice about the separate one is that you can reduce, that we can incentivize people to do catchment, to put, dry wells and things like that by reducing the fee itself versus, reducing the.
You could probably develop an abatement program for people on their water and sewer bill if they were to do that separately. Yeah.
It would be a nice incentive, because that's the whole point, right, is to limit the volume of runoff.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've beaten this.
That's why I was curious if it would be a bylaw or anything, because if it's rates and it doesn't allow us, or maybe we could have some regulations or something.
Yeah, I would think you would
Whatever
need
we do
some
with assessments To allow for that,
Could I ask maybe you and Dave to check with,
Danny.
Dave, check with Dan to see what could be done and come back and, if he says it's a roaring headache and we can't do it, then we either have Weston Sampson or nothing, but.
Well, we can certainly use just finished square footage.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
I mean,
so let's-
again, it's not perfect, but it's an approximation.
yeah, so I'm just, let's see what they could do with that and then come back and take a look and see. Because if that's very feasible and good approximation, we
Well,
start
I mean, you
there.
can get it in picture property, so
Yeah.
every parcel is finished square footage.
Okay, sounds good. So you'll come back to us shortly? Okay. Couple more pieces. I don't know that we have to deal with these.
Thank you, Beth. Oh, but, hold on. Are we gonna have water runoff issues with this?
We are.
Can we, since this came,
Certainly.
so what can we do to address this development, given that it's all in Woburn,
Yeah,
but the
so,
water, yeah.
I would think that this board and the planning board could provide comments to the Woburn City Council to the permitting granting authority for this project. I don't know if that would be required to go through NEPA, it's a large development, so it may.
Environmental notification from.
I mean, from what I've seen, it's an extra around 30 acres of.
It's a
Of
pavement,
impervious
Of
surface.
impervious surface,
huge
yeah.
potential impact to the African River. I mean, we need to absolutely on top of it.
So, I mean, it looks like the Woburn City Council is moving pretty fast on it, because they want the development. What can we do to make our flooding concerns heard?
Well, number one, if there are permit or zoning things that get done as a neighboring community, you get notice, you get to comment. You may be under the category of an aggrieved party, maybe you get to appeal, but at the very least, you can, as a good neighbor, I'm sure they would keep you in the information queue for what's being proposed.
What can we do right on the front,
On the front?
What do we have to do
It's-
to make sure that happens?
So we're not.
No, our various departments, our office, Beth's office, DPW, we can all make, and this office can contact the mayor's office. We can all make sure that we're in the notification queue for what either the city council or their planning board takes up.
Yeah, I would think that we would certainly want to review any of the engineering documents that come in and potentially have VHB look at them, as well as a peer review for any, flood issues we may experience.
Yeah. We've sat down once with the development team. This is a little bit bigger in scope than what we were told was under consideration, but,
But also just to understand if they have sufficient catchments or whatever the terminology is, so.
Yeah, it's more about right now it's an undeveloped area for the most part, I mean. Craft Foods
Totally
obviously-
pervious.
yeah.
No, I mean, there.
Well, you get the factory and,
Facility.
Part of
Right.
it,
Yeah.
but certainly they're taking a lot of what is pervious and making it impervious, so that generates a lot of runoff, and you need to put in infiltration and detention
So
systems
like,
to.
do we know if they are?
I've only seen this conceptual plan, so, I mean, I would imagine they are,
Wouldn't they be required, or is that up to the women?
So they're required, so the state standard is a rate control, so the rate of stormwater runoff, so that's CFS. The town of Winchester has a volume control standard as well, which other communities do not have, Hoover does not have. So they control the rate, but still have more volume of runoff going off of their property under the mass stormwater regs. And obviously that is a concern from a flooding standpoint.
Yeah, it goes right into our,
Yeah, it goes right into the river.
into the Everson.
So again, I would think once they get into the permitted phase, we probably want to have VHB look at the detailed engineering documents and provide comments to their permit granting authorities.
Just I meant to mention it earlier, but your letter from FEMA?
Oh, yeah.
I think, so good. I think if I read it correctly, we've been moved from category 8,
Step up.
pay an arm and a leg, to 7, which pay an arm.
Yeah.
Maybe we can arrange to get that information. Do we have a mailing list of people
It
who?
automatically goes, every time somebody renews their policy.
Okay.
it just comes
But I was
automatically.
suggesting maybe we use one of our news blurbs on the webpage and put some information on this up there, because it's a result of a lot of work on the flood mitigation program, and I think,
It actually doesn't have anything to do with the flood mitigation program, there's a whole.
a whole series of things.
Host of things we have to do to qualify.
But I think it would be good, A, to take some credit for it, and B, to make sure that people know that there is some progress on it, because the rest of it may take a while. Okay. We had some articles on work items and inventory. I'm going to suggest we just hold off on those. I don't think we need to do with them tonight. There's a list in the handout in the back there of the committee assignments, and I think we typed them up as best we could make sense out of from my scrawl and Deb's and everybody else, but would you sometime in the next day or so just review that list? There's a couple places where we'd say we'd come back and volunteer somebody, see if you'd like to be the volunteer, and then see if you've been volunteered for something you really don't want to be volunteered for. Come back and let us know if you'd like to swap something or rearrange a deal with somebody to cover this and things like that. So, primary thing I think then now would be the consent agenda, unless there's something else.
Go
Mariana, do
back
you want to
into
run through?
executive.
Yeah, we're going back to executive.
And move back to executive, yeah. So let's do the consent first, and
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve one-day alcoholic beverage licenses for Jason Petchy at 40 for Winchester Boat Club, June 23rd, July 7th, and July 28th, 2018 at the Winchester Boat Club at 65 Cambridge Street. For Rich Borgatti for Mountain Strength CrossFit, June 29th, 2018 at the Mountain Strength CrossFit Gym. For Julie Amor for Farm to Fork, June 16th, 2018 at Sanborn Hut. For Yoscari Gonzalez for event staffing by Josie, July 1st, 2018, Randall Farm. To Gay Morbacher, July 7th, 2018, at the Sims Room of the Unitarian Church.
Second.
okay. This might raise one question on the boat club. They've had, I think, 3 separate applications. 2 of them are for 200 people to be centered on the clubhouse and the deck. And one of them is for 60 people over, I guess, 2 days each, the clubhouse, the deck, and Swanson Cove. Given all of the debate we had last time on that, do we have any opinion as to whether we want to restrict it to the clubhouse and the deck, or is the number of people fairly modest and it's not going to be an issue?
Yeah, it's interesting where it says regatta and typical event, and
Yeah.
there was that really impressive regatta last year, but maybe that's just the typical term for any race.
I thought
This
the
isn't the large one.
the larger attendance was restricted to the clubhouse and the deck.
Yeah, the 200, they have 2
Yeah.
requests in there for the 200, number of persons attending event, 200, there are 2 of those, and they're restricted to the clubhouse and the deck. And then the regatta ones with, they say 60 people both
Which is
days.
2 days.
Over, so 60, I guess. But they're not restricted to the clubhouse or deck, and, use Swanson Cove. I didn't know whether we had any opinion on that. It's a relatively few number of people in each case, so it wasn't 200 in the cove, so.
It's a all-day event, though, is it?
Yes, but this is sale liquor stuff, so.
Well,
It may
it
be
makes
all-
sense to restrict
I
all of them to,
presume they'll be sailing part of the day and drinking them
yeah.
in the after reception.
Right, well, it makes sense to restrict them all to the clubhouse and the deck then.
Yeah, also because
Isn't-
we're not technically supposed to, not just the boat club, but any organization to have alcohol within close proximity of underage,
Yeah.
right?
No.
Well, I think it was more what we dealt with last time with the
What do
big
you- what do you mean?
regattas. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I thought that was actually, we can maybe, we're not a town council here, but, I thought that you're not supposed to have alcohol kind of in close proximity to when you have underage, people attending that event. You know, right, you know, where they have close proximity.
Has to be controlled access to it. yeah.
So where it's the code,
restaurant,
that's what
yeah.
makes me wonder, you know what I mean?
That's
Like,
kind of
because the
a
code is
open-
the whole.
It's kind of a big
it's the
open
whole
area.
field. So, like, if people are walking around drinking, that's, I don't know what's planned here, so maybe.
Oh, the Swanson Cove is,
I mean, we approved it last
oh,
week.
wait a minute, I'm thinking, there's area, you're facing out from the club, there's the area over Little Creek and to the left, and then there's the Swanson Cove is the area over to the right,
It's the open space, it's the open land.
on the right side, next to Route 3.
Well, no, the other side.
Is that
It's in the
Swanson,
neighborhood zone.
is that Swanson Cove, or is that
That's what
considered?
I thought,
I've
yeah.
forgotten them.
Wasn't that where they put the tent last year and you
Correct.
restricted them to have only the open area facing the water?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that the
but-
three sides had to be closed?
But what's the area to the right between the clubhouse and and Route 3 that has the small beach?
Yeah, I didn't know that ever.
The
had
pool
this.
deck?
Different area, yeah.
Hmm?
that's
The pool
different.
deck?
Basketball courts.
Yeah, this is a small open area that
Yeah, no, I know
serves,
what you're talking about, but
It's a
there's a
different
basketball
area.
court there.
that's not called Swanson Cove.
No, it's on the other side.
Swanson Cove is across the
The
thing.
open
okay.
field.
It's the open field.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Isn't, if you sell alcohol, don't you have to do it in an enclosed area anyway? So they wouldn't be able to sell alcohol in Swanson Cove.
Yeah, well, last time they did it under
Because
a
it's
tent and that was
containment
roped off.
in
and-
that area, it's
yeah.
not just selling it, it has to, the whole area. So, it has to be roped off or at least cordoned off.
Cordoned off and patrolled, so.
So Swanson Cove is a big area
Yeah.
to allow
I think
for.
it's a good point, Lance, also because you're closer to the water. I mean, without more, like, it would have been helpful to have more information.
Well, we can
If they can
approve.
do, if they can do 200 in the clubhouse and, pool deck,
Yeah, and I
they
just.
can do it for
if
60 people.
If it's only 60 people, I'd
Yeah.
assume that we not get into the fracas we had last time, so.
Yep.
So perhaps the motion would be modified for that one to,
Clubhouse and that.
Or do we need a new
All-
application?
all of the, I don't think so, I think we can.
Yeah, I think you can just vote it
Yeah.
I think we could just say thank you very much, not the Swanson, accept the Swanson Cove.
All of them restricted to
Clubhouse
To
and
clubhouse
and
deck.
deck.
Okay. So would you
And by
want,
deck, is that,
that's the pool
Pool
area,
deck.
yeah, pool deck. yeah.
just to make sure that it's a pool deck and not a deck attached to the,
And pool deck,
Well,
okay?
I mean, it's a good point, it's defined, and this one day is 2 to 5. and
No,
you
it's
can
meant-
do
it's
that.
well,
it's meant the
it's
area
on the
right-
third. On the third, it says clubhouse and pool deck. The other two just say deck. So I think we can assume, we
Pool
should,
deck, yeah,
we should
Specify.
amend it to say pool deck to be specific.
I'll
okay.
make sure that a copy of your vote goes with the licenses.
Okay, so would you want to modify the proposal, you want to modify the motion to eliminate the Swanson
Like, pool deck, like there's all these kids there.
clubhouse and pool deck, but not Swanson?
Yes, the motion as stated with the, for the ones for the boat club being for the clubhouse and pool deck.
Okay, for all three occasions and
For
not,
all-
and not
for
including
all-
Swanson.
For all of the
I
licenses.
don't know if I would assume that that's pool deck with that one that we got take off Swanson Cove. Because I think part of that construction of what they've been working on includes a deck.
Mm.
Well, but that would be part of the
Yeah.
clubhouse, right? Okay. All right,
Fair,
so
but
how
I don't-
about we say they're all for clubhouse deck and pool deck?
I mean, I'm just saying, if they haven't said pool deck on this one that includes daytime, 2 to
Mm.
5, when they're big kids, then I don't think we necessarily wanna insert it.
Just say clubhouse.
Yeah, or just say, or clubhouse and deck, but don't assume that it's pool deck there,
Oh.
because maybe like 2 to 5. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if they
So-
don't wanna serve, if they don't wanna serve in the pool deck, they don't have to.
Well, the pool deck is different from the deck, right? So clubhouse and deck.
But not Swanton.
But
So,
not
but
Swanson.
are you saying that the one that says clubhouse and pool deck doesn't include the deck that is attached to the clubhouse?
That's
We
what
don't
I'm
know.
That does it? Yeah.
Okay, let's try
How about
a
if we say
motion.
clubhouse, deck, and pool deck, not Swan's Cove and all of them?
And
Okay, so
this
do
is
I-
okay to go, this goes till, the larger event goes till 10 PM, is that okay?
I think that's probably reasonable, yeah.
I mean, have they notified, they probably haven't notified anybody in the area, huh?
Okay, okay, do we have a second on the,
Second.
okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and, okay, and,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept a donation for $581 to the Council on Aging, for, toss it into the HOA account from,
gift account from, oh,
This is from various people, I asked them about that.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I thought you would, they said
Yeah.
it's a whole bunch of small contributions.
all right, so we would like to thank all of the contributions to the Council on Aging that make up the $581.
okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved, okay.
Move that we approve the creation of a gift account for the acceptance of donations to establish a memorial garden at the library.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve, well, first, does anybody have any corrections to the minutes for April 27th, May 7th, May 18th, May 29th? No? Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the meeting minutes for Friday, April 27th, 2018, Monday, April 30th, 2018, Monday, May 7th, 2018, Thursday, May 10th, 2018, Friday, May 18th, 2018, Friday, May 25th, 2018, and Tuesday, May 29th, 2018, as were in the packet.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so at this point, we will take a motion, I guess, well, we'll conclude the public section, go back into executive session, not to return, or I guess we could return out of that and then conclude the meeting.
Yep.
Public section.
Adjourn,
Okay.
yep.
So at this point,
So
we go back, so we moved and seconded that we go back into our recessed executive session. And I'd like to take a 2-minute
Yeah, we'll take a roll
break
call
if we
vote,
could.
yeah.
We need a roll call vote to do that. Mrs. Welch?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and did you want to ask a question before we close the door? Sure, go ahead. So we'll take a short recess to refill your water bottle, ma'am. Yes,
For
we'll do
executive.
that. I don't know.
LEMNNIOS. It's up on the website.
So we are going into executive
Up on
session.
the website. Okay. You're welcome.
Close that.